something to him. I thought they were all acting so strange, but I was such a little girl then, how else should they have behaved toward a traitor's daughter? She heard Elaria sigh, heard her draw in another breath, and then release it, even heard the way she closed her mouth, as though she had thought better of whatever she had meant to say. May the gods forgive her. Sansa was grateful for it, a little just as she was grateful that Elaria had not had her carried from her bed. She did not think she could have borne whatever kindness Elaria might have intended. After a few more moments, though, as Elaria was running a damp comb through her hair, Sansa managed to find her voice once more. It was the Hound who saved him, as much as me. I don't know why he thanked me for it. The Hound. Elaria repeated. Do you mean, her voice dropped slightly, as though she were saying something foul, something really shocking, do you mean Sandor Clegane? Truly. It was Joff's Tony, for his name a day. Even distant as she was from herself, from the wretched creature in the bath, the one whose fault this all was, she felt that creature's throat ached as she spoke. He got drunk, and forgot he was supposed to tilt, and forgot to put on half his armor besides, or even his trousers. Joff meant to drown him, and I said he mustn't, and I made up some stupid story, about how it's bad luck to kill a man on your name a day. He didn't believe me, I could tell he didn't, and I knew he was just going to have them beat me for speaking out of turn, but then the Hound said I was right. He was the only one of them who never beat me, you know, she added, suddenly. Sedontos? Elaria asked. The Hound. Joff only had the Kingsguard do it, and Sedontos wasn't a Kingsguard. But the Hound never did it. And Joff never argued with him, or had him killed the way he did anyone else who told him no. Isn't that funny? She had wondered, sometimes, why that was. Joff had no great respect for the man that she could see, and little affection. But he was too stupid to see when the Hound made fun of him, she thought. He wasn't a knight, either. Knights are supposed to protect ladies, but Dontos only started trying to help me when he wasn't a knight anymore, and the Hound never was. He hated knights. I wonder what's become of him, since he fled. Did you get his cloak? His cloak? It was with my things. He left his cloak with me the night he left. It was with my things. I hope it wasn't in with, you stupid girl, now you're thinking of it again, that terrible shape under the guard's cloak. Elaria seemed to understand, and bent down to lay a kiss on her brow. I shall go to the keep myself soon, and see if it's still there. No, she said, sitting up with a splash, and turning to look at Elaria. She'd gotten water on Elaria's dress, but it was important. No, you mustn't. Please, my lady. I shouldn't have said anything, it's a stupid thing to worry about anyway. You mustn't go back, my lady, please. Who knew what they might do to her? Elaria was already hushing her, though, and leaned to rest her forehead against Sansa's, her soft warm hands on Sansa's shoulders. Sansa's hair was dripping all over her silks, but she did not seem to care. It's all right, Sansa, she whispered. It was not a stupid thing to think of, and truly, I do not think I would be at risk, but if it will set your mind at ease, you have my word that I shall not go back. Breathe, my love, only try to breathe. Even the thought of Elaria going back to the keep, to Maegor's, had set Sansa's heart to racing again. I am only some poor dumb rabbit, chased until its little heart bursts. I am no wolf at all. But they made me think I might be, again, and oh, how sweet that was, while I thought it. They were only trying to be kind, they couldn't have known how cruel it was, to make me believe it. But she said none of this to Elaria, only listened to her slow, deep breathing, and tried her best to match it with her own, until, finally, they were breathing together. Elaria. She had drawn Sansa out of her rooms as soon as she dared. She walked as if in a dream, but she let Elaria lead her off, and when she moved, of her own volition, toward Oberyn's rooms, Elaria was more than happy to take her there, and steer her to the chaise by the remnants of last night's fire. Draw her a bath, please, she asked Zia, who arrived soon after, still a little pale herself after settling Porcella in the kitchens with a cup of wine. Like Elaria, Zia seemed glad of something to do, and she set to the task rapidly, sending one girl off to the kitchens to see about water before disappearing, herself, to fetch clothing for Sansa. Oberyn had a bath of his own, off of his bedchamber, though he preferred the common baths near the kitchens. It was this that Elaria ordered prepared. It was the men's day to use the common baths, but even if it hadn't been, she should have shut the place off from others entirely while she and Sangza were there, which was hardly fair to the rest. She lost track of time as she sat with Sangza on the chaise, one arm around her and the other stroking her hair, waiting for Zia's word that the bath was ready. She caught herself humming something, some old children's song, only when Sangza began to hum it along with her. "You have a lovely voice, my dear," she said softly, more to say something than anything else. She had heard her sing before, made her embarrassed with the praise before. "Thank you, my lady." Sangza's voice was hard to hear, even so close. She did not look at Elaria, and Elaria suspected she did not know that she had spoken at all. She had not called her my lady privately in days, or at least not without catching herself at it. She did not seem to mind as Elaria drew her a little closer, and that was a mercy, for Elaria did not know how else she might show her own distress, her own concern, her own love. Sangza did not seem to notice when Oberyn came in, but he stopped in his tracks when he saw the two of them. Elaria looked up at him briefly, and he gave her a small smile, one that she managed, barely, to return. Her attention was drawn back to Sangza after a moment, but she thought, from the corner of her eye, that he stood gazing at the two of them for several minutes, and when he finally went over to his desk, his steps were at least a little lighter. Zia returned with the wine after the bath. One of the girls had brought a fresh sleeping shift for Sangza, but Elaria draped her in one of Oberyn's robes as well, and returned to the chaise in front of the fireplace to sit with her a little longer. "Here you are, lady," she said. "Nice and warm, and with a bit of dream wine as well from Maester Raymond. Same as Shella had, and she's sleeping soundly now. She'll be right as rain soon enough, and so will you." "Thank you," Sangza said, and managed to return the smile, but her eyes were still far away, and the smile was a small enough thing. "Yes," Elaria said, "thank you, Zia. Take your time, love, but be sure you drink it all." Oberyn, bless him, stayed clear of them now. She heard his footsteps in the hall now and again, as he tried to keep himself occupied. Sometimes he would check on them, though, as if they might have vanished in between when he last saw them. She could not fault him for that. Indeed, when next he peered in, she was glad of it. Sangza had finally drifted off to sleep again, and Elaria could not carry her to the bed herself. Oberyn gathered her in his arms carefully as if she might shatter. Neither of them had discussed where she ought to sleep, but they did not need to. Of course it would be in their bed. It had already been made up again in the time since they were wakened, and Elaria was glad of something to do herself, able to pull the covers back for him. Once he had put her down, Sangza stirred a little, murmured something, but did not truly wake, thank the gods. Elaria pulled the covers over her again, and then sat next to her, stroking her hair, gazing at the way the sunlight from the window played in it. Oberyn did not leave yet either, sinking to the floor and leaning his head against Elaria's leg, hanging onto it with one hand while he hid his face in the other. His sigh was soft, hard to hear over the singing of the birds outside, but she could not miss how ragged it was. It helped her, to have a hand on each of them, one on Sangza and one on Oberyn. She wished she could give them the same soothing, willed some of the calm she had regained to through her hands and into them. The thought made her smile a little. She could not have said how long she and Oberyn remained thus, but at last, she drew a deep breath and lifted the hand with which she stroked Sangza's hair, squeezed Oberyn's shoulder with the other. "Come, my love," she said softly, offering him her hand, and glad he did not let go of it once he had stood. Back in the solar, someone had laid out a little food for them, and, more importantly, wine. Elaria poured herself a cup, and Oberyn as well, but before she could give it to him, she found herself putting the pitcher down, and the cup she held, as well. He seemed to know what she needed almost before she did, for he folded her, instantly, into his arms, just in time to keep the pieces of her from scattering about the room, to hold her into a shape like herself, for as long as she might need. She only wept a little, all told, but she stayed like that, in Oberyn's arms, much longer. Everything seemed very far away for a few moments, everything but the memory of the deathless still girl she had held in her arms and the reality, now, of the warmth of her prince's embrace. "She will be all right," Elaria whispered, and she could not have said which of them she was trying to reassure. "She has endured so much worse, gods, she has seen worse than dead men. She saw her father, but that set her to weeping once more, harder this time. Oberyn did not hush her or echo her own insipid platitudes back at her, Gods bless him, only held her all the tighter. At last, she managed to draw a long, shuddering breath, and then another, more steady. Oberyn did not let her go just yet, however. She was not sorry for it, was more than happy to stay here in his arms, with the birds singing outside. He sighed, finally, and let her go, only pausing to kiss her gently. "You are right, of course," he said, taking up the cups she had filled and passing her one. "She will heal in time, but—" "I know," Ellaria said for him. He gave her a little grateful smile, and she managed to return it. Then she put her cup to her lips and drained half its contents. When she looked back at him again, he was staring at a trunk beside his writing table, a perfectly ordinary one that had come from Dawn with him, smaller and of a darker wood than the one from the Red Keep. But he stared at it as if he were seeing the dreadful thing all over again. She did not want to ask, did not want to speak of it. If it had been her choice, the two of them would down cups of dream wine as well, and go right back to bed. But we must be stronger. For his brother, and for Dawn, and for her, until she has recovered more of her own strength again. They had both finished their first cups of wine and were well into their second before either of them spoke. "He was only just killed," Oberyn said. His voice was low, but she heard the edge in it, and she saw how he clenched his fists. He was trying to keep his rage under control, and she could hardly blame him. No more than a few hours ago. His throat was cut. Not in the trunk itself, there isn't enough blood. I expect the body was stuffed in as soon as the blood stopped flowing. Much longer, and the smell would have given the game away before the trunk reached her rooms. "Gods," Ellaria said, and she could not take her eyes away from his trunk either. "They meant for her to see it, then, whoever this was." Oberyn nodded. "If it was only meant for us, that would have been a good deal more easily accomplished, requiring only that they dump him on our doorstep. This was meant for Sansa, too." "Meant by whom? To what possible end?" Ellaria asked. Her prince only shook his head as he dragged his gaze, at last, away from his own harmless trunk and back to her. She did not expect Oberyn to know any better than she did. He would not have kept it from her if he had any idea. But she had no other way to express the churning in her guts, the roll of her sorrow and horror, and her own rage, too. At last he said, slowly, carefully, "I do not think that this was Lannister work. Oh, it smells of them, sure enough, and it was someone who knows enough of the Keep's comings and goings to accomplish this. But if they knew the fool's part, then I think the Lannisters would have kept him alive for the trial, and we should likely be fighting them much harder to keep Sansa here, if they had not used him to arrest her already. I would guess that this was done by whomever she was meant to meet when we found her in the Godswood. To silence him, certainly, but also to punish him for his failure to retrieve her, and—" His voice was strangled, and he trailed off, his eyes blazing, unable even to finish the thought. He gazed through the doorway to his bed for a moment, then spun and stalked over to the balcony. "And they sent his body here to punish her, for her desertion," Ellaria finished for him, sickened, barely able to whisper the words, joining him and trying only to breathe the air, as though the cool autumn breeze might carry some of the horror away. "Thank the gods we found her first." Oberyn laughed a little, a dry, angry sound. "Sir Dontos might not agree with you, but I do, may the Seven forgive me. Thank the gods for the spider, even, for giving us reason to notice her, to follow her. Whoever this friend was, I shall sleep better knowing she is free of him." "The Tyrells?" Ellaria asked. "They wanted to marry her to Willers." He shook his head. "They do not rule by such blatant terror. They might well have done the killing, but they would never let so much as a whisper of it reach her, let alone the corpse itself. If they did let any word of it get out, rather than simply making him vanish, it would be with some dreadful tale about him having wicked designs on her, to make her all the more grateful to them for saving her from him. More likely, though, they too would have kept him alive to trot out as a witness against the imp and help them clear the way to her for Willers. I expect we should have had word from them before now, as well. They'd not approach us directly, to be sure, but they'd have started to put out feelers, tried to learn what plans we have for her." "What plans might we have for her?" Ellaria asked, straightening to look at him directly. It was not the most pressing question at the moment, perhaps, but it was one they must begin to consider before too long. They had not thought very far ahead, any of them, not least because Sansa herself did not seem ready to do so just yet. She has lived so long in terror, Oberyn had said once, as they lay together talking, only thinking as far ahead as the next day, that I expect she has forgotten how to think in longer terms. But with the trial, there was more than enough to concern themselves with, so they had not discussed the future much privately, either. Oberyn shrugged, and did not reply for a moment. He looked over at her at last, though, and followed her back into his solar. For myself, I only want to get her to Sunspear as soon as I may, he answered, finally, with another glance toward the doorway to his bedchamber, where a pale sliver of her face could just be seen. Beyond that, well, it is for Doran to decide, of course. Even if the imp does not lose his head, the marriage will be undone soon enough. If she desires otherwise, I suppose Doran might not object, but I do not think she is so fond of him as that. A marriage will have to be made at some point, for the Sake of Winterfell, but besides, she will never know a moment's peace without one. Willers would make her a good husband, in truth, I think, though to be sure, the Tyrells will never come here to suggest such directly, nor beg that we darken their doors for the same purpose. Now that she is under Martell protection, a Tyrell marriage would be a more ticklish matter. Not impossible, though, he added, thoughtfully. There is Quentyn, but Doran has his own plans for him. Will you make me be the one to say it, then? Ellaria asked, smiling in spite of herself, in spite of everything. Say what? Her prince looked surprised, cocking his head, and she felt her smile grow. Oh, I do love you, my sweet stupid prince, she said, and pulled him to face her so that she could kiss the tip of his nose. Doran's sons may be promised, but he does have a brother. You are enamored with her already, I dare say. I am, Oberyn started to protest, and then, seeing her look, he continued sheepishly, well, I dare say I am no more enamored than you. I do not deny that, she said, refilling both their cups once more. But, what with my being a bastard, and a woman besides, I cannot marry her, so what I think is of far less consequence. Unmarried men of a suitable rank are rather thin on the ground at the moment. That happens, I have heard, with wars. Do not play coy, my love, it does not suit you, she could do far worse, and so could you. Oberyn snorted as she pressed a cup into his hand. You flatter me, Ellaria. You would not love me half so well if that were true, she pointed out easily, and he chuckled softly in agreement. The sound, the way the fury in his eyes seemed to ebb, if only slightly, helped to thaw her heart a little, made her feel as if the ground under her feet were a little steadier. Anyway, she continued, if you have not had the thought already, which I suppose, my beloved idiot, is entirely possible, then I do think that you must begin considering it. If it has not occurred to your brother already, I have no doubt that it will. Nothing occurs to any of us that my brother did not think of 2 weeks ago, Oberyn complained half-heartedly, and dismissed 2 weeks less 1 day ago. Quentyn, perhaps. She is 3 and 10, and he is only a few years older. If he should return from Essos unwed, it will be after enough time has passed that marriage may be less of a terror for her. And as I say, though it would be a more tricky matter, Willers is not out of the question, either, though I think that he is rather old for her. And I am older still, he added pointedly. Oh, to be sure, Ellaria scoffed, you are positively frail with your advanced age, as withered as an old apple. And after all, I know how you hate the sight of a fair young creature in your bed. He snorted again, but shook his head. I shall not deny, certainly, if I were 20 years younger, I should press my suit without hesitation. Perhaps even 10, I think. But, by the time she is old enough. She is a woman flowered, wedded if not bedded, Ellaria reminded him. I agree that it should be left a year or 3, at least. Indeed, were she 10 years older, I should say much the same, for she must have time to heal. But in a year. Even 5. You are hardly ancient, love, I do not expect you will crumble to dust in that time. Oberyn said nothing to this, and she sighed. Well, as you will, she said, and kissed his brow. His eyes were a little less angry, at least, the lines around his mouth a little less deep, and that was something. But for my Sake, and for hers as well, I would ask that you not discount the idea out of hand. She is lovely, she is clever, she has a sweet nature and gentle heart, she has half the 7 kingdoms to her name, We are both near in love with her already, and not least of all, she trusts us, or at least, I think we would not flatter ourselves to say that she is closer to trusting us than many other living persons. That is no small thing, after all she has endured, and it is something you ought to remember when considering what match might be best for her. If you are determined not to be convinced, very well, though I warn you I shall not give up on the idea this easily. If nothing else, I think you had best start marshalling your arguments against the marriage for your brother. He smiled at that, but there was something more distant in his eyes, and sad. Do you think she trusts us, truly? He asked, and the softness in his voice near broke her heart all over again. Oh, my darling, she murmured, pulling him away from the door to the bedchamber and over to the chaise. My sweet, sweet Oberyn. She had meant to comfort him, but she was glad when he wrapped her up in his arms. For almost the first time since Demon woke them, she felt safe again. She should not, was all he said. I told her they would not reach her here. Gods, the moment we found her, I ought to have found the next ship to Dawn and put her on it, with Demon and a dozen good swords besides. But I wanted to rub it in the Lannisters' faces that I had her. Perhaps the gods will forgive me for my pride, but she should not. You vowed to her that she would never enter the Red Keep again, but that she willed it, Oberyn, she told him. You vowed to her that they would never take her from your protection. You have said yourself, this was no Lannister work. No Lannister work, no, he said, but it is not only Lannisters who pose a danger to her, and whoever did this thing, look how much trouble they had to take to do it, she told him firmly. And look how little they could do, in truth, besides. That this was a spiteful, cruel thing to do, I do not argue, nor that it was tragic for the poor fellow, and a blow to her. But you do her an injustice if you think that this one blow will break her. She is stronger than that, and once the terrible shock is less fresh, she is still wise enough to know that this one dreadful thing does not undo all the good that you have done for her, all the honor you have shown her, and I think she loves you well enough not to blame you, either. He laughed a little, softly, at that. You do flatter me, my love. Is that what you think? She asked. Oberyn, how could she not love you? She is a wise young lady, more than wise enough to see through all your blustering and guess the good man you are. He shook his head, drawing closer to her even so. She breathed deeply, letting the smell of him calm her. He said, at last, if I thought she did. Ellaria sighed, trying to keep her patience. The two of you would make a fine match indeed. You are both so determined not to hear the truth of yourselves. But she at least has the excuse of being only 3 and 10, and having spent the past 2 years a prisoner. I wish you would hear me when I tell you these things. If you do not believe me, fine, but I beg you, today at least, not to argue with me about it. Let me say only this, before we came to King's Landing, I thought I could not love you more than I already did. You are the father to my children and the love of my life. What more could I have ever dreamed of? And yet I was wrong, for everything that you have done for her has made my love even stronger. She felt him smile, that was something, and he was, at least, wise enough not to answer her this time. Eventually, lack of dream wine notwithstanding, she noticed that his breathing had evened out, that his eyes had closed. She was glad of it, and glad, as well, to lay there, half dozing, as afternoon began to settle about the manse, and the world began to feel a little steadier and warmer around her again. Chapter 8. Chapter text. Sansa. She was not sure where she was when she first woke, but somehow, this did not terrify her. The soft voices beyond the heavy, half-closed curtains of the bed were familiar, safe, and the linen smelled like sunshine and oranges, and cinnamon, maybe, some sweet spice, and also of pepper, a little. Then she recalled that she had been in the prince's personal bath, and why. Dimly, she remembered Ellaria guiding her to another bed after giving her a glass of wine, dream wine, she recalled. Zia said that Maester Raymond gave some to Porcella, too, and then sitting with her once more, stroking her hair as warmth and sleep took her. Oh, she thought, wondering, I am in his bed. Their bed. The thought should have shocked her, but somehow, it didn't. Perhaps she had used up all her horror today. She should have remembered if anything truly terrible had happened here, after all, not that it would. She knew Prince Oberyn better, now, than to believe he would take advantage of her. Even if he wanted her, which, since he had Ellaria, did not seem likely. No matter what the lady said when she was being kind to Sangza, about him being jealous and all. It was only a bed, and an empty one. Well, empty except for her, but, then, she hardly counted, really. She felt so empty herself these days, or she had, before they found her. It was not such a strange feeling to have again. Dozing, dreamily, she watched the light that came through the shutters of the bedchamber's windows, and listened to the soft voices from nearby. Eventually she came to recognize them as Elaria's and Oberyn's voices. They had stayed close by her, she realized, close enough that she could even make out words. They were afraid for her, they wished to be near. The thought helped to thaw, a little, the cold that had seized her when she first woke this morning. "You're thoroughly enamored already." She could hear Lady Elaria's words, and the prince's, too. "I dare say no more than you are," and in her dreamy state, they seemed as clear as if they were speaking right beside her. Who could they be talking of? She smiled, remembering some of the lords and ladies from the feast last night, wondering which of them could be so lucky as to have them both enamored. "She is 3 and 10, she heard Oberyn say then, and still, it took her a moment to understand. It did not frighten her as it might have, once, even a few days ago. It did not seem real enough to be frightening, for one thing. She must be dreaming still, that was all. But oh, what a dream! How kind of the gods, to let her have something so sweet, after all that had happened. "Thank you, all you gods," she whispered to the pillow. Which of them might it have been? She had thanked them all at dinner last night, she remembered, and Mother Rowan as well. The only things about this day that had brought her back, a little, to herself, that had felt real, were like a river, warm and gentle. Perhaps it was Mother Rowan she ought to thank, after all, she had been the one they brought with them. She was an old god too, in a way, Sangza thought, for Nymeria had brought her when they fled Valyria. Pondering gods, she began to drift away to sleep again. Suddenly, she remembered, jerked a little, waking, and the memory of why she was here came with it. But a few more moments, and she managed to drift off again. Recalling her prayers, she added, "And please be gentle with Sedontos. He did not deserve it." Perhaps it was thinking of gods that took her to her next dream. "Lady." Someone whispered, and she could not say who. Lady was dead, she was lost from the others. There had been 6 of them once, but now the silent white one and the little brown one were lost beyond the end of the world, and her grey brother was gone, just gone, and she was gone as well, wasn't she? But, Lady. It was a tree who had whispered it, but trees did not speak, not with man words. It could not have been a tree. Sangza. And now she turned, there was a tree, a white tree with red leaves dripping down like blood and a face that she knew, but how could she? And how could it know her? "It is you. You lost your wolf, we thought." Shaggy and Summer howled when she came back. "We buried her, how can you?" "Bran," she whispered, and the tree smiled at her, a little boy's smile, so much younger than the faces of the weirwoods. "I dreamed you," she said. "There wasn't a weirwood, there's no weirwood in the Red Keep, but father took us to the Godswood anyway, and I dreamed you, and I saw you smiling, and you're dead." She remembered, but it did not seem to hurt quite so much, not in this warm, safe place. "Oh," her brother said, sighing. "Yes, that's what they say. We're not though, you know, not at all. It's just safer this way." "But how are you here? You lost your wolf." Unless, she asked, for her brother had worked out how to talk to her through a tree, so she supposed there was no shame in asking him what he meant. "Well," he said, "there was a bird one time, when I was learning to change. There was someone else in her, and they say it's because she was like us, sort of, once, and then her person died. So her person went into her, only maybe it could work the other way, too, and if she had died first, she could have gone into her person." Oh, it was her turn to say, and she gasped, and the idea, the mere idea, it warmed her so. She hardly dared speak it aloud, but Bran was little and didn't quite seem to have puzzled it all out yet, even as clever as he was. So Sangza said it, she dared to say it, dared to risk it all melting away and turning into lions laughing at her. Do you think Lady's still alive, then? With me?" "I guess so," the tree who was her brother said, and he looked so puzzled, so confused. the way he did when Maestlawin gave him a problem and Arya would strain her shoulder raising her hand and trying to get his attention, and Sansa started to try to get his attention but then decided to try and whisper the answer to Bran instead. He was just little, it wasn't his fault he didn't know, after all, and what was the difference between Maestlawin telling him something yesterday and Sansa whispering it to him today? Only this time she did not know the answer. This time, the best guess was that he knew it. Anyway, he said, after a moment, we're all quite well, you see. I spoke with Jon, too, this way, or at least I think I did. I saw him, just as I see you. I suppose it might have been a dream. But this is my dream, Sansa said, and the little weirwood face of her brother frowned. No, it's my dream, he said. Just because you're bigger and you're to be queen. But I'm not to be queen, she said, you know that, don't you? No, he said, surprised. Truly? I'm sorry. I know you wanted to be queen. Oh, but I didn't, she said. At first I did, but not for long. Oh, Bran, Joffrey was awful, don't you know that? This is my dream, you must know that. No, it's my dream, he said again. That's why you're not going to marry him, because he's awful, so I'm dreaming that I won't have to have him as a brother. We're the ones who hated him, you liked him. You're going to be queen. No, she said, feeling half a child again, so annoyed that her stupid little brother wouldn't listen. It's my dream, because Joffrey was awful. You were all right, I guess, if you hated him. I should have hated him, I should have, I was so stupid. You all could see it, but I couldn't, and it's all my fault, I'm the one who told them, it's my fault. No, that's stupid, her brother said. He was nice to you, after all. I mean, I guess you were a little stupid, but girls are always stupid. Mostly. I know one who's all right, I suppose, he said, and Trees couldn't blush, but it almost seemed that he did. You were always such a sweet boy, she said, when we could get you down on the ground long enough. You must tell me who she is, then. I told Jon how to talk to girls, and he told Robb. I can tell you, too. She's not like most girls, though, her brother said, she's a little like Arya, I guess, except she's different, too. Oh, you do like her? Sansa clapped her hands. You can't say how nice she is, how special. You like her too much. Oh, Bran, it's just like a story, she's perfect to you. Shut up, he said. Your stupid love stories were always the most boring. That's silly. I don't love her. No more than I do you, anyway, or Arya, or Jon or Rickon, he said, decisively. Or even Old Nan, or Hodder. If you say so, Sansa said, and she half sung it, she was so pleased. Boys were always so silly, even Bran, and Jon, and Robb, and no doubt Rickon would be too. They didn't know anything. Shut up, her brother said again, and frowned at her, but she did not fear the tree now, for it was only her brother, and there was another beside it, now that she looked, that looked more like father, except a girl, a little girl, and she knew it was Arya, and then another on her other side, which was Rickon, complaining that he didn't like his supper, and to the other side of Bran was one that slept, and then to its side was another, still awake, looking about, and Jon's face in it smiled at her briefly, wonderingly. Weirwood leaves were red as blood, but Jon's were a brighter red, even orange here and there, or black, so that he seemed to wear a crown of dark fire. The only one who did not so much as look at her was the sleeping one, Robb, but that did not upset her the way it should have. Was that wicked? She did not think so, for he was only sleeping too heavily even for her and Bran calling each other stupid to wake him, or Rickon, tired and grumpy and entirely displeased with his supper. Behind her flowed a river, warm and shallow here, wider than she could see across. When she woke, she could smell something good, and her stomach rumbled before she could quite remember why she wasn't in her own bed. Even when she did remember, she didn't feel so distant and cold as she had when she first woke this morning. The light had changed, gone softer and more goldeny orange, and someone had lit a few of the candles in the room while she slept. They had left her in the prince's room, she realized, after blinking about her for a few moments. The door to his solo was half closed, but all was still now, except for the distant sounds of ladies' voices drifting in through the window. Someone had left a pitcher of water next to the bed, and an empty glass, which she filled and drank from gratefully. Feeling more awake now, she got to her feet, and found that her robe had been folded neatly on a chair nearby. Her stomach grumbled as she put it on, and she followed the nice smells of food to the solar. The silence had fooled her. Prince Oberyn was at his writing table, looking over some papers. But as soon as she opened the door, his eyes were on her. "My lady," he said, jumping to his feet. "Is aught amiss? Do you require anything?" "No, my prince," she said, flustered, trying to curtsy as best she could in the robe. "Forgive me, I was hungry, and smelled. I did not know you were here, or I should have dressed properly." "Pardon me," she said, backing towards the bedchamber once more. Prince Oberyn was too fast for her, however, and caught her arm. "Nonsense, Sansa. You had no reason to think you must be dressed, and the robe preserves your modesty quite well. Even if it did not, I do have 7 daughters. I can see a maid in her sleeping shift without going mad with lust." She felt herself redden more, ashamed that he might think her so distrusting, after everything. "Forgive me, Prince Oberyn, if I gave you cause to think." "You did not," he said, guiding her, gently but firmly, over to the table. "It was a jest. Not a very good one, it seems, for it was meant to help put you at your ease. I fear I have made a terrible mess of it, so I hope you will forgive me. Sit, eat. Ellaria is in the gardens with a few of the other ladies, but if you would feel more comfortable with her, I know she would not object, or else I can summon a maid to help you dress, and you can join them. I had a few matters to attend to before tomorrow, however, and now I am glad, for I hate to think of you waking to an empty room after all that you have gone through today." She managed to smile a little, barely, as he piled a plate with cheese and fruit, and poured wine from the pitcher for her. "I am quite content here," she said, and meant it. Sitting down on the other side of the table, he studied her, until she felt herself pinken again under his scrutiny and set herself to nibbling at the food. "You look better," he said, at last. "I had feared, but I should have given you more credit. I knew you were a strong lady already." "You are too kind," she said, for she was not certain how else to respond to that. "I am sorry to have given you cause for trouble on my behalf." "Nothing a man does on your behalf could ever be counted trouble, Sansa," he told her, his voice soft. She looked up from her food, and found that he was still studying her, his dark eyes warm and gentle. In spite of herself, she managed to smile, just a little, and when he smiled back, something in her felt just a little less ragged. The two of them sat in comfortable silence as she ate and he retrieved the letters he had been reading. "Ah," he said after a moment, "I nearly forgot, a raven arrived from the Water Gardens, with a letter from my brother. But there was another, as well, for you." He shuffled through the papers, frowning. "From Prince Doran?" she asked, startled. What he might have to say to her, she could not possibly imagine. Oberyn must have heard something in her voice, for he looked up, bemused. "Would that be so strange? You are an honored guest of our house, after all." But as it happens, this was from the Princess Myrcella. "Doran says that he and I are both under strict instructions not to read it, for she has informed us that it is quite improper to read a lady's personal correspondence, but if you think it might be." Sansa was already shaking her head. "No, Myrcella was always very sweet. Nothing like Joffrey at all. That was our experience with her, when first she arrived, but, well, I cannot be too careful, it would seem," he said, with a bitterness that was so at odds with his easy manner that, instinctively, she tried to recall their conversation, to determine what she might have said or done to insult him. I am very sorry to have given you cause to think so," she managed at last, and he blinked at her, apparently baffled. "Why should you apologize to me, my lady?" he asked. "It is I who ought to beg your forgiveness. Only days since I gave you my word that you were safe here, someone has managed to make a liar of me." "But I am safe here," she said, and was almost shocked at herself, however softly she might have said it. Prince Oberyn did not answer her right away, and when she looked up, she saw that he was looking at her again, and something about him looked so sad and tired that it made her heart ache for him. "Do you truly feel that way?" he asked, softly. "No, forgive me, my lady. Ellaria warned me not to make this into your burden to bear, you have enough of those already." "But I do," she said. Her voice was a little stronger this time, though she blushed to hear how it shook. I do feel safe here. I feel safe, and honored, and cherished, she managed, recalling what he had said to her at his table last night. And it was the truth. Maybe it was only the dreams she'd had that made her feel so much stronger than she had this morning, but she had not had half so many wonderful dreams in 2 years at the Red Keep as she had in 2 weeks here. That must mean something, mustn't it? He could hardly be expected to care about a silly girl's dreams, however, so she did not embarrass herself by trying to explain that. He did not press her further, thankfully, but he held her gaze a little longer, and when he smiled, there was something heavier to it, softer. At last, he looked back down at the papers before him, and said, "Ah, here you are, plucking one out from the rest." Sangza took it, but did not open it just yet, only gazed at the sun and spear seal. "Is Myrcella happy in Dawn, do you think?" she asked suddenly. It was the closest she could come to asking, "Might I be happy there?" She could not tell, looking up, whether the prince understood what she was really asking, but he considered her for a moment before answering. "I do," he said. "She and Tristan suit each other well, as you say. She is a sweet child, and so is he. She near worships my niece, too, and my daughter Tyan, and they are quite fond of her as well, and my little Loenir worships her in turn. She misses her little brother, and her mother too, but even then, she only speaks of how they must come and visit her in Dawn." "I am glad to hear it," Sangza said, and she was, for Myrcella's sake and her own. The prince considered her a moment more, even as she turned her eyes back to the letter, but he did not speak, and she heard him return eventually to his own correspondence. Cracking the seal, she was surprised by how much it warmed her heart, to see the little princess's neat handwriting. "Whatever awaits me in Dawn, I will not be entirely without friends there, at least," she thought. "Lady Sangza, Prince Doran has had a letter that you are under his brother's protection until my uncle Tyrion is free, and I am very glad to hear it. He and Lady Sand are very kind, and I am sure you will love them as much as I do, and that they will love you as much as I do too. Prince Doran says that he does not think Prince Oberyn has a singer, so I said that he must tell him to find one because I recall how you like music. If he does not do it, you must tell Elaria, or else write back to me and I shall send him a letter myself. For Prince Doran says that he is not always good at following instructions, but I am to be his princess after all. Will you and Uncle Tyrion come to Dawn soon? Prince Doran says he should like to meet you both, and I think you would like it here. I suppose you may be too grown up to play in the water gardens, but no one is there at night, so I shall make Sir Aris take us then and he will keep it a secret. There are lots of lemons here, you know, and I have already told Prince Doran and Princess Arianne that they must make sure the cooks know how to make lemon cakes because I know they are your favorites. If you see Tommen, please give him all my love, and the same to Mother and my Uncle Tyrion as well. I hope I shall see you very soon." "Is it a pleasant letter, then?" Oberyn asked, and she started a little. He had been so quiet, she had nearly forgotten that he was there. "Forgive me, my lady," he said, as she looked up again. "It only did me good to see you smiling again." Oberyn. Not long after Sangza had awakened, Demon came to him to say that a visitor requested his presence. "They can call again later," Oberyn said, scarcely looking up from his letter to Doran. Or, rather, what would become his letter to Doran, eventually, if he could manage to get everything down into some kind of order. "The man says it's urgent," my Prince, Demon said, and there was something else about his voice that made Oberyn look up. He looked puzzled, not truly worried, thank the gods, for Oberyn did not know how much they might bear, but vaguely confused. It was enough to pique Oberyn's curiosity, at least, and, bidding Demon keep Lady Sangza company in his absence, she protested, but Demon, with his disarming smile, put her back at her ease quickly enough, and Oberyn did not have to tell the truth, that having Demon stay with her was as much for Oberyn's own peace of mind as for her safety. The fellow was downstairs, in one of the smaller rooms, and there was something familiar about him, the sort of thing that nagged and worried at one's mind, but he could not put a name to his face. "I understand you have some business, sir?" he asked. "I am Prince, that I have," the man said, and then, when Oberyn had pulled the door shut behind him, his voice changed, going higher, softer. "I thank you for deigning to see me. I was quite afraid I might have to reveal myself to your handsome squire. I mean to cast no aspersions on the fellow's trustworthiness, to be sure, but a disguise becomes rather useless once enough people know what lies beneath it. By the speech, it could hardly be anyone else, and yet Oberyn still only half believed that he was correct in his guess. "Lord Varys," he asked, at last, managing, barely, to keep his voice low. The man smiled. "As I say, my prince, I have a request for you. An invitation, as a matter of fact. Someone wishes to meet with you tonight, very urgently. And you will give me no further detail than that, I assume. You will understand, I am sure, if I am not inclined to take you up on this invitation. Quite understandable, given what has transpired today, of course. I do hope poor Lady Sansa is well. So many blows to her tender heart already." He sighed. "But no, you will be quite safe, for whatever my word is worth. It is only words this person wishes to exchange, nothing more dangerous than that." "Ah, yes," Oberyn said, "and you of all people know how little danger words can pose, to be sure." Another little smile. "To be sure, my prince. But I think you would find this conversation interesting. At the very least, diverting, and in such dark times as these, we must find our entertainments where we might, hm." Oberyn sighed, but he could not pretend that he was not intrigued. "Will you at least tell me where we are bound?" "Oh, just an inn, much like any other. Nothing as befits your station, to be sure, but not so dreadful as some in this city. By all means, bring a man or two with you, though I think the greatest danger you will face will be the innkeep's beer. Very strong, yet so smooth that a man hardly realizes just how strong until he wakes up the next morning having gambled away 3 months' wages." "I shall beware," then Oberyn said. "Very well. Let me fetch my coat and my squires, then, and see to my ladies." Ellaria was still in the gardens with some of the other women, but when he drew her aside and told her, briefly, of his errand, she made her apologies and followed him to his rooms quickly enough. Taking up his coat and daggers, he sent Daemon off to find Sir Aaron, and bade Sansa and Ellaria farewell. Sansa gave him a tired, shy smile, but Ellaria scarce paid him any mind as she exclaimed over Myrcilla's letter, which Sansa had showed her. Satisfied that she would be safe, he made his way back down to Varys. It was not far enough to be worth the bother of saddling horses, and from what he could see, the inn was just as Varys had promised, unremarkable, but clean and pleasant seeming enough. "Dare I ask if you know aught of whose work Sir Dontos was?" Oberyn asked as Daemon and Aaron laughed and jested with one of the serving wenches. He was not fooled by their merriment, however, they would be studying the place, just as he was. "Or perhaps, more to the point, dare I ask if you will tell me aught?" The eunuch's lips went thin for a moment, and he sighed. "Alas, I am disturbingly ill-informed on the question. The work itself was done by some guard, but one man says it was Ollie, and Ollie says it was Harry, and Harry says it was one of the kitchen girls dressed as a guard, and in the end, no one knows who this figure might have been, or, more importantly, who might have paid him to do this dreadful thing." Oberyn nodded, then asked, "If you did know, would you tell me?" "You are most unfair, my prince," he said, sorrowful. "Why, I have delivered a great gift to your family, and here are the only thanks I am to receive, suspicion and mistrust." "A gift?" Oberyn asked, annoyed. "You speak as if you delivered us a horse." That seemed to amuse him. "I beg you will forgive me if I seem callous. I forget, sometimes, that there are still men of honor in the realm. The last one I saw lost his head on the steps of Baelor's, and he was only here to replace the one before that." "You flatter me, Varys." "I suppose tea's only my habit," he said. "At any rate, here we are. Do be careful, my prince, this is a respectable enough little place, but of course, sometimes the ordinary things can be far more dangerous than the uglier ones. I'm sure you're more than equal to it, and to the person who summoned you, but it would cause so many problems for any number of people if anything ill were to befall you." "And still, you will give me no clue as to who this person is?" he asked, amused in spite of himself, in spite of the fact that he was also checking to see that his daggers were where they ought to be. "Oh, I should hate to ruin the surprise." Oberyn almost thought that he smirked. Daemon and Aaron, meanwhile, had settled in a corner of the common room where they could easily watch both stairs and door. Oberyn glimpsed one of the girls bringing them beer before Varys led him up a few flights of stairs and down a narrow, dim little hallway, finally arriving at a door as nondescript as all the others. He knocked twice, and when a woman called "Come in," Oberyn's interest rose a little further. She was near as well disguised as Varys, clad in a common serving wench's rough linens, her hair beneath a kerchief. With the evening sun behind her in the grimy little window, there wasn't enough light to make out her features. But the linens were too clean to be truly hers, and when she turned, the golden light caught in her eyes and made them flare as green as wildfire. "Prince Oberyn," the Queen said, as he stepped across the threshold. He heard the door close behind him, and thought he heard footsteps as Varys retreated, but who could say for sure? Guessing the direction of his thoughts, the Queen shrugged. "He'll be listening, I've no doubt. If not himself, then I'm sure he's got one or another of his little birds nearby. But I had need of someone to bring you here, so I expect he would have found out somehow. Why not skip the middleman?" "Sensible," he said, bowing. "But I hope your Grace will not think me impertinent if I ask what this is about, and why the secrecy was needed at all." "Impertinence is permitted to princes," she said, with a smile that was not a smile at all, taking up one of the cups and filling it with beer. "It is queens who are not allowed it. As to your question, would you have answered a summons to the Red Keep? One made in secret, requesting that you come alone, or with no more than your squire at your side?" "Not eagerly," he admitted. "But why should it have been at the keep? Would the gossip be so shocking if you had come to call on me, instead? I hope you will give me at least as much credit for sense as I give you, my prince," she said, pressing the mug into his hand. "Myself, alone, in the house of a man whose family despises mine, who shelters a traitor's daughter, and one with little more cause to love me than her new guardian, did you call yourself, when last I saw you? We did not leave our customs behind when we came to King's Landing, your Grace, and one of those customs is to honor the rights of our guests," he said, which was very foolish, but then, he was weary, and wary. "And Lady Stark did love you once, you know." Whether that was meant to soften his words or sharpen them further, he could not have said. Cersei's mouth tightened, but then she surprised him. "I owe you an apology," she said, and so, as soon as he was recovered from the shock, he wondered what trap she meant to spring. "For my behavior the other day, and my words," she added, reluctantly. "I cannot say I regret the sentiments behind them, but I might have been more courteous." "I am a father, your Grace," he said. "Should I have held one of my daughters, should I have watched her fight for her last breath, I should be as hungry for vengeance as you, I do not doubt. Indeed, I am a brother, too, and more than the council, that same hunger is what brings me to this city in the first place. Such vengeance must fall on the proper heads, however. I will not recount all the evidence that has convinced me of Sansa Stark's innocence. This trial takes up enough of my time already, and it has not even properly begun yet, but suffice it to say that I am convinced." He refrained from mentioning that he could not have blamed her if she had done it herself, much less that all he had learned from her, the way she still flinched, the distant look in her eyes this morning, left him sorry that he could not have done the deed. "So you say," the Queen said, studying him quite as openly as he was studying her. "It seems to me, however, that her innocence, as you call it, is quite the opportunity for Dawn. And more than Dawn, a comely maid, the heir to Winterfell, in your household. I do not think I am presumptuous in saying that sounds like a fine match for you, my prince. And with your brother having 2 sons, it seems unlikely that you will ever inherit, but I dare say the north would be some consolation." "My brother has 3 children," was all Oberyn said. "And he, and they, are more than welcome to the high seats in the Tower of the Sun. I have little taste for the business of ruling. But as to my nephews, I should confess, your daughter has only a slightly better chance of being the wife of the Prince of Dawn than I have of ruling. My niece, Arianne, as Doran's eldest child, comes before either of his sons. Though, of course, talking of inheritance, you know, by Dornish law, my younger nephew ought to sit beside Queen Myrcella, first of her name." The Queen had poured out a cup of beer for herself as he spoke, and though she did not look up, he could see enough of her face to know that she was listening. Without time to school her expression into one more fitting, he saw the hunger flash in her eyes when raised her cup for a delicate sip. But she only said, "I had forgotten." Oberyn chuckled at that. "Your Grace, we both have other business to attend to. I have a household and you have a kingdom." "A kingdom? You are too kind, my prince. I have only a son," she said, in as soft and sweet a voice as any dove's, but he had seen too much of her to be fooled by that. "You have a son," he agreed, "who is hardly weaned, and who has a kingdom. We shall never love each other, your grace, but at the least, I think we understand each other too well to pretend either of us is an idiot." She turned back to the little window, and its view, and he was about to declare himself finished with this whole business and walk out of the room when she sighed, and her shoulders slumped lower than he had ever seen. She turned back to him then, and the softness in her face this time seemed less false somehow. "She looks less beautiful, strictly speaking," he thought. "There are more lines about her eyes and mouth, but she is more attractive now, I think. She is still lovely, but it is a true loveliness." That was enough, for the moment, to stay him, not the new beauty about her, but the honesty of it, the sadness and weariness and ineffectual anger. "I am ambitious, my prince," she said at last, after she took a long draught from her beer. Her voice was softer than when she had been playing at a dove's coo, and yet he believed her this time. "I shall not apologize for it. Perhaps I had been better born a Dornish woman. It seems to me you have more room for such as me." "We do," he said, risking a sip of the beer himself. He did not think she would try to poison him, not yet, anyway, when he might still see to it that her brother lost his head, but he would not have thought she might seek him out as she had tonight, either. He added, "And so does the North, from all I have seen." She laughed a little at that. There were lines about her eyes, her bright, sweet eyes, and though he supposed most would say they made her look less beautiful, he had never felt so attracted to her, not even when his mama had brought him and Elia to the Rock all those years ago, when he was barely old enough to know that his cock was good for more than pissing. "I wonder sometimes," she said, picking up her cup and approaching the table to top it off once more. "If we had switched, or if our men had, I suppose, we ladies would never have had so much choice in the matter. Caitlin Tully would have made a fine queen for Robert. If he said Lyanna Stark's name on top of her, I've no doubt she would have gritted her teeth and borne it. Indeed, I expect she would have willed her hair darker, her eyes more grey, to make herself look more Starkish, using nothing but sheer force of Tully dutifulness. And if I had married Ned Stark." "I do not think your grace was made for the North," he said, but he was not laughing as he said it now. She gave a soft chuckle at that, took another drink of her beer, and finally looked at him again. "No more than you were, I think, my prince." Oberyn could not help but chuckle, too. "I have known winters before, but nothing like theirs, true enough. But, then, Sansa Stark was not made for Dorne, originally, and I think we shall be bound for there once all this is over. If I take her to my own home, it seems only meet that I should return the favor someday. Indeed, I am quite content to let the Boltons have Winterfell for the nonce. Or perhaps, more properly, I should say I am quite content, for the nonce, to let Winterfell have the Boltons. The castle is not in a fit state for habitation right now, as I understand. I wonder what will be left of them come spring. Why trouble yourself with Winterfell at all, whatever the season?" Cersei asked, and something in her voice made him think they were nearing the heart of this little rendezvous. "Why not leave the North to the Northmen?" "Oh, but I am sure your grace has heard that I have traveled a great deal," he said lightly, not actually drinking from his glass. "I have never seen the North, though, which, more and more, seems a great lapse on my part. And perhaps I would like Winterfell, now that you mention it." "If it's Winterfell you want, there are easier ways to get it," she said. "Oh," he asked. He said it more because he knew he ought, because he knew Doran would, but truth be told, now that he thought on the matter a little, the only reason he cared half a whit what became of Winterfell was because Sansa Stark cared. "Women cannot take the black," Cersei said, and however she tried, she could not quite hide the satisfaction in her voice. Perhaps that was why she turned away from him, gazed out the window. "Though if you are so determined that she should have her miserable life, there is always exile. She does pretty enough needlework, so I suppose she could manage a living as a seamstress in the Free Cities, or a singer, or some fisherman's wife. She would do quite well as a courtesan, but that Stark pride of hers would never allow it, I'm sure." Conveniently he said, "When she did not, courtesans in the Free Cities are far better guarded than seamstresses, or singers, or fishermen's wives. An assassin would come a good deal cheaper." "You are unfair, my prince," she said, and she turned away from the window, drew a little closer to him before looking up and meeting his eyes at last. "Certainly, if my husband willed it, I should allow the girl to live." He had expected the offer to come up at some point while he was in the city. Lord Tywine had hinted at such already, but still, the manner of it startled him. He supposed he had thought she would make some attempt at seduction first. Why else, really, would they meet here, in disguise, in some filthy inn? Perhaps that surprise was why he couldn't help the laugh that burst out of him. To her credit, the Queen did not seem offended. She smiled herself, in fact, and gave half a shrug, as though she knew just how this looked. "My father had suggested the match to me before you came to the city," she said, and laughed a little herself as she did. "As well as Willers Tyrell and others." There was a little twist to her mouth, sheepish, as though she were any ordinary woman, as though she had spilled a glass of wine or put her dress on backwards, and were laughing at her own silliness. "Others?" he asked, mildly, as if he were any ordinary man whose lady had spilled a glass of wine or put her dress on backwards. She sighed, the smile still playing at the corner of her eyes, and ducked her head, and finally mumbled, "Boulogne Greyjoy," and set them both to laughing. It was a real laugh for him, in truth, and he almost thought that it was for her, as well. "She is beautiful like this," he thought briefly, sadly, pityingly. "So much more beautiful than as a queen. Perhaps if she had been any ordinary woman, she might have been happy. But of course, if she had been any ordinary woman, if he had been any ordinary man, they would not be here, having this conversation." "Tell me true, Your Grace," he said at last, reaching for the beer and refilling his cup, "would you really be content to let her scratch out some dull little life in the free cities? Would you really be happy to marry me, to remove to Winterfell, knowing, of course, that my paramour would sit on my other side at feasts?" "My late husband had women aplenty," she said, sitting down on the bed and sighing. "And bastards, too. Women can bear a great deal, my prince." "And must, particularly when the Lannisters have anything to say in the matter," he said. She stiffened, but did not close up entirely, for which he had to give her some credit. "You are not wrong," she said, and did not flinch away from his gaze. He sighed. "The truth, now, Your Grace, I beg you. We may never love each other, but I think we could," "I think," she said, with a queer little twist of her mouth, as she gazed over her glass. "We could have, I suspect, had my father sent me back to Dorne with you when first your mother made her offer, that would have been easier. But," she said, with a lovely sadness and softness, "I think we still could. A paramour, bastards, I confess I do not know Dornish ways very well, but I understand these things are less insulting from a Dornish husband than one from elsewhere in the Seven Kingdoms. And, well, I'll not deny that you chose well, my prince," she added. She looked up at him again, from under lowered lids. "She is a lovely creature. No man could deny it, and no woman, either, I dare say." "Perhaps I should have brought her," he said, but he felt no real stirring at the idea, now that he gave it any thought. "She has always had a penchant for golden hair, you know, and we have near as few of those in Dorne as redheads. At any rate, perhaps you are right. Perhaps we could love each other, eventually. Say that we did. Would that be enough for Sansa Stark to live? If, for the sake of whatever love might possibly grow between us, I asked you to let her go, leave her in whatever peace she might find in exile, would that be enough?" She said nothing for some moments, and he was about to thank her and depart, his question answered, when she spoke once again. "Would you do less, for your own child?" she asked. "You are a father, my prince, indeed, you have been a father for longer than I have been a mother. If your daughter were murdered, and you could have her killer's head for a marriage and a castle, would that not seem a small price to pay? And then if your new wife, the one you got in the bargain, begged you to stay your hand, to let that killer walk free, can you truly say that you would?" "No," he said, and it came quite easily, for he continued, "not so long as I was certain the price I paid was for the murderer's head, and not some innocence." The Queen surprised him then. She did not rage or scoff, she only narrowed her eyes a little. There is more life in her eyes than in her father's, at least, Oberyn reflected. After a moment of searching his gaze with her own, she said, "At last, she has truly convinced you, then. Perhaps she is cleverer than I gave her credit for." "Two things can be true at once," he said easily. "You have most certainly underestimated her, she is more than passing clever. But yes, I remain quite convinced of her innocence in your son's murder. But even if I did not," he continued, "I have taken the girl into my household. She has drunk my wine, eaten my bread and salt. As I told you earlier, such things still have meaning for us down in Dawn. Ah. I would have expected you to be more direct, my prince, you have such a reputation for boldness. You mean to accuse me of having the blood of her traitor mother and brother on my hands? The queen refilled her own cup, rolling her eyes. I shall not claim to be such a picture of insipid maidenly purity as the blessed Sansa Stark, but I had nothing to do with the Red Wedding, at least. How could I? You know my father. You have seen how high I rank in his estimation. Her hand fluttered, for a moment, to the yellowing bruise on her cheek. He would never guess that I might have counsel on such matters. And if he did? Tell me, if your father had brought the scheme before you, what would your counsel have been, your grace? He asked, sipping his beer. She flushed then, and did not meet his eyes. If the gods, in all their wisdom, had created another 7,000 worlds, and in one of those worlds he had been tempted, for one moment, by what she offered, he hoped that would have ended it even for that craven version of himself. But all he said was, I see. There was no need for the Lady Catelyn to die, she said, though her cheeks were still pink, as though she knew quite well how feeble an excuse this was. She went mad at the end, they say, she killed Lord Frey's grandson. Who knows what else she might have done if she had not been stopped. Catelyn Stark's son was murdered before her, Oberyn said. Is every mother mad, who watches her child, her firstborn son, die a violent death at the hands of his supposed allies? Should no mother be trusted, who has seen such horror? She laughed then, a sweet, sad, quiet laugh. Well struck, my prince, she said, not bothering to hide her bitterness. The victory gave him no pleasure. He set his cup down, barely drunk, and bowed. I thank you, your grace, for your time, and your very generous offer. I pray the gods will forgive me for whatever I did to make you think I might agree to it. I wish you joy of your prize, she said, her voice cold. Now that it had vanished, he was surprised to realize that her gentleness, her warmth, may have been real. It did not change his mind, of course, but it was certainly interesting. Ah, she added, as he pulled on his coat. Such a fine coat, my prince, but if you'll allow me a piece of advice, you'll need one much heavier. Even in summer, Winterfell was cold, near as cold as my little brother found his bride's sweet little cunt. His fists curled at his side, and only the knowledge that it was precisely what she wanted stopped him from dealing some retort, or else raising a bruise on her other cheek to match the one her father had given her. Instead, without turning back from the door, he tried to keep his voice as level as his brother's would be. Sansa Stark is hardly the only lady who is cleverer than men credit her, of course, he answered. You said that you think I was not made for the North. You may be right. But my niece will rule Dawn after my brother, and her future good sister is quite fond of Lady Stark, if the letter she sent was any indication. I have another nephew besides, and my brother's bannermen have many boys among them, and who knows where things may stand by spring, when marching will be easier. This summer was long, your grace, and a long summer means longer still until the next. If, come spring, I find that I cannot bear the cold anymore, well, there will be others of my family, younger and stronger, who might. He looked back before he shut the door behind him, and though he did not feel anything really like happiness, he found himself smiling as he added, summer is some time gone, my dear Lady Lannister. And as they say, winter is coming. Chapter 9. Notes. Are not to jinx it, but I think this thing might actually be close to done. The next chapter is about half written, I just need to actually figure out how to get in everything I need to and tie it all up. Possibly there will be an epilogue at some point, too. No one jinx it. Chapter text. Sansa. After she had eaten, and shown Myrcilla's letter to Ellaria, the lady asked whether she might like to take a turn about the gardens. I find that fresh air can help, and most of the others have gone now, so you need not worry about dressing fine or making conversation. We shall simply enjoy the evening. But after the day you have had, and with what awaits on the morrow, if you do not feel. But I do, Sansa said. It was true. She had slept most of the day away, and though she still felt strange and light and shivery, she did not feel so awfully cold and empty as she had this morning, when first she woke. Even the thought of facing the judges tomorrow did not frighten her so much as it might have. Her dreams had given her strength, and Myrsilla's letter had helped to warm her further. I think I should like that. Elaria smiled. I am glad to hear it, she said, and stroked Sansa's cheek. You look much better, my dear. You were so pale. Prince Oberyn said the same, Sansa said, and Elaria's smile grew wider. You are very dear to us already, you see, she said, and though she felt her cheeks go pink, somehow, this time, Sansa managed not to argue, not to say that they were too kind. They were, but with all that they had done for her, it was not all just courtesy. They did care for her, truly they did. I ought to dress, was all she said, though, and hurried back into the bedchamber. A maid had brought some of her things in, put them on a chair behind the screen in the corner. The dress was simple but fine, of linen soft as moleskin in a soft buttery yellow. It made her think of sunshine, and the sweet dream that she'd had earlier, of Ellaria and Oberyn talking of her, and there was a pretty bronze belt to go around it. Ellaria did not seem to mind that she did not speak much, and talked of her daughters, and the water gardens. When Sansa mentioned Myrsilla's letter, about sneaking in during the night, she laughed. Never fear, I shall keep her plan a secret, she said, still chuckling. When they returned to Prince Oberyn's chambers, Ellaria still did not let go of her arm, but sat with her on the chaise once more, telling her stories that she had learned from her mother's mother, Elizane. She did not think she would sleep at all that night, but she must have done, for suddenly the lady's voice woke her. My dear, she was saying softly, stroking Sansa's hair, but for all her gentleness Sansa still woke with a gasp. The windows were closed now, and there was rain falling softly in the gardens, so that all was green and grey and misty. I am sorry, Ellaria said, drawing back, smiling bravely. I would not have woken you, you seemed so happy in your sleep, but the other judges will be here in a couple of hours, and I thought you would prefer to have time to dress and break your fast. Yes, my lady. It was a reflex, as she blinked the sleep from her eyes and tried to slow her racing heart. Yes, she said again, seeing Ellaria's dark eyes clearly now. Thank you. She was still in the prince's solar, she realized, looking around. Ellaria had covered her with a blanket and slipped a pillow under her head, but this was the same chaise where they had sat last night, talking softly. You let me sleep here, she asked. I'm sorry, I ought to have. Nonsense, Ellaria said, helping her to her feet. If I had a penny for every time one of my girls begged just one more story from Sarilla and fell asleep almost before she drew breath to tell it, I would be richer than any Lannister. That is why I always insist upon the most comfortable furnishings. What a decadent wretch you must think me. She laughed as she said it, smoothing Sansa's hair. The laugh was a little too easy, though, a little too bright, more brass than the sweet golden laughter that Sansa had come, she realized, now, to rely upon from Ellaria. Sansa could not bring herself to laugh this morning, but she found she could smile, at least. The laughter faded from Ellaria's eyes when she did, but she did not say anything, only sighed and stroked her cheek. Come, she said gently. I shall dress your hair myself. It is a silly thing, I am sure, no doubt Shella or Zia or Cass or any of the other maids could do something much more interesting with it, but I am not so terrible, and I hope you will indulge me. And furthermore, I cannot expect that you have much appetite, but I must insist that you at least eat something, fruit, or eggs, or a bit of cheese. This will be all the harder on an empty stomach. Or else I shall eat something, and then I shall be sick all over the judges, Sansa thought. Ellaria drew Sansa into the prince's bedchamber, which stood empty, the bed all made up, and no sign of Prince Oberyn to be seen. My prince has been busy, was all Ellaria said. He was out most of the evening on some errand, then took over Maester Raymond's chamber for hours, finishing, well, some business that he began after speaking with the other judges a few days ago. Then he slept briefly, only to wake an hour ago, dragging poor Demon down to the cellars in search of the perfect wine for the judges. It must be just the right Dornish red, he says, a good rich one, dark as blood. Ah, here we are. This last was said as she threw open a chest and pulled out a gun. It glowed like moonlight in the bright morning sunshine, but Sansa realized as she looked closer that it was not white, but a soft silvery grey. The dress itself is rather plain, I'm afraid, Ellaria said. But it will serve for today, and we can embellish it later. It is a Dornish style, you see, but, she turned it around and showed Sansa the back. There was, a cape, she supposed, slim and light, of the same delicate silk but a few shades darker, falling from the shoulders. Thread of silver flowers cascaded down it, just enough weight that, though it would move, it would not flutter at the slightest breeze. "I know you do not like to show your back," was all Elaria said. But it may be that you are called upon to show it, in the trial, to show how despicable the boy was. I thought this a good solution. You can pull it aside easily and without any shame as soon as you need to, but otherwise, it will hide whatever you wish to hide, and then once you are done, it will fall back into place, with no fussing or other trouble. I cannot imagine that this will be easy, precisely, but I thought that might make it a little less difficult. Sangza stared at the dress. I must say something, she thought, but she could not find the air to speak. You are too kind, my Elaria, she managed at last, the courtesy barely whispered but said nonetheless. Elaria made as if to reach for her, and then seemed to think better of it. I have told you before, my sweet, I am nothing of the sort, she said instead, but softly, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she smiled. But I do not dislike my Elaria, I confess. I am that, whatever happens, you know. Your friend, and you have more important things to do than listen to my simpering, forgive me. She nodded toward the screen in one corner of the room, and pressed the gown into Sangza's hands. It seemed to Sangza that she held on, her soft, warm hands on Sangza's arms, for longer than she needed to. I don't think you will need a maid to dress, but I shall stay here to help you with your hair after. Only call for me if you need help. Help, Sangza wanted to cry, help, please, help me, I don't know what to do, but she kept silent, and somehow, her feet carried her behind the screen. My Elaria, she thought, and mouthed the words to herself. They helped, made her feel as though she carried something warm and sweet and golden with her as she dressed. Lord Tywine arrived on horseback, and Lord Tyrell in a litter. And there, behind, carried by one of the guards, his face red and furious, was her lord husband. He wore a hooded cloak, but even so, she saw that he was soaked. They made him walk, she said to Elaria and Sir Demon, watching from the window above the great hall where only 2 days ago she had felt so happy, so full, so comfortable. They made him walk, he could not manage it the whole way, they made him walk. She had said it thrice now, and she could not say why, precisely, but something about it made her angry. She knew there was no love lost between Lord Tyrion and his father, but Lord Tywine was so proud, even prouder than the Queen, where his family was concerned, and Tyrion, too, even though he seemed to hate them, almost as much as she did. Sometimes she thought he hated her for hating them. Why would he ever have risked such an indignity as his son being carried like a babe in arms? I suppose they did, Elaria said. Her voice was quiet. Sangza could not blame her for not being certain how to respond to that. Sangza was hardly certain how she felt about it. Except something in her was angry, so very angry. Something in her seemed almost to snap and growl, like. His legs could not manage the walk, she explained, for she could sense Elaria's uncertainty. They never could have. They must have known that, he gets awful cramps in them, and he's still not entirely recovered from the black water, and still, they made him walk. She spun around, no longer quite so afraid, somehow. That was stupid, she knew it was stupid not to be afraid, she ought to be afraid, she ought to be terrified, and she was more frightened than she could say, but, his son. Lord Tywine is his father, and he allowed him to walk until his legs gave out. He knew that they would give out, probably. He never could have made it here on his own power. Sangza felt a hand on her shoulder, and even though that frightened part of her, the part that had ruled her before she looked out the window, made her flinch, she did not turn away this time, did not shrug Elaria's hand off. What's wrong with me? She asked, even as she turned. Gods, why should it matter? I do not love him, he is still a Lannister, but this is cruelty, Elaria said, taking one of Sangza's hands in hers. And you have a good heart, my sweet. And somehow, then, she was brave enough to take Elaria's other hand in hers, besides, to hang on to her just for a moment. I'm ready, she said, and for once in her silly, timid life, her voice did not shake at all. Sir Demon escorted her in, and said that he would stand beside her all the while. It might look improper, she supposed, if one of the judges were to do it. Besides, Oberyn had been in the kitchen until almost the last minute, still busy over whatever it was that had taken him to the cellars in the dark of the morning. The squire had stayed, she thought, but in truth she remembered little of the whole ordeal. Because she was his witness, Tyrion was there as well, but he was permitted to speak little. She thought that he looked a little less drawn by the end, but everything was such a fog that she could hardly be certain. Then it was done, and Sir Demon was helping her to her feet again, and offering her his arm. As they made their way out, she was struck by something, the last of what courage she had in her, perhaps, and turned back. "My lord," she said, facing Tyrion, "I had a letter from Princess Myrcella yesterday. She sends her love, and hopes that she will see you in Dorne soon." Tyrion looked near as shocked by her outburst as she felt, but at last, he closed his mouth and gave a little bow. "I thank you, my lady," he said, and even managed a ghost of a smile. "Whether I shall be able to return the sentiment in person, the gods alone know, but I know you will find some suitably pretty words to write her on my behalf while we wait for my fate to be decided. I am pleased to do so. My lords," she added, and she could not meet Lord Tywin's gaze, for she knew if she did these last few threads of courage would fray to pieces, so she looked at Lord Tyrell instead, who gave her a fatherly smile. "Princess Myrcella also sends her love to his grace her brother and her grace her mother. I hope that one of you will pass her regards along." "Certainly," Lord Tyrell said jovially. "How sweet of the child, to remember her family. And how good of you, my dear, to inform us. I've no doubt it will bring them comfort." "I am glad to hear it," she managed, and turned away, taking up Sir Demon's arm once more. She only laid her hand on it until the doors of the hall closed behind them, and then everything seemed bright and sharp and loud again, and she hung on to him more tightly. "It's all right, my lady," he murmured, taking her back up the stairs. "It's over now." They had questioned her for only an hour and a half, Ellaria told her later, and she supposed it was true, for it was still morning outside, but had Ellaria said it had been a week, a year, she could have believed that, too. "But it is over now, my love," she said, wrapping Sansa up in an embrace. "Thank the gods, it is over now." Sansa could only pray that she was right. Ellaria. Sansa's testimony was meant to be the worst of it for their household. Oh, there was still hardship to come, none of them were so naive as to doubt that. But this was the last of the trials that Sansa herself must be a part of. This was the last of the ties that still bound her to King's Landing, to the Lannisters. Even if her husband were found innocent, the marriage would be set aside soon enough. Within a moon's turn, she would be bound for Sunspear, and all of this would be behind her. Ellaria had even begun to make arrangements for the journey. So when, a few days after her interview with the judges, Oberyn told her that he had volunteered to serve as the Imp's champion in a trial by combat, she was so angry that she nearly slapped him. Well, not at first. At first, when he told her what he would be doing on the morrow, Ellaria thought her prince was jesting, and merely informed him that she did not think it a good joke at all. "No jest, my love," he said, and she looked again at him, and saw something fierce in his dark eyes. "The Imp has chosen trial by combat. Lord Tywin has summoned the Mountain as his daughter's champion, and tomorrow, I shall kill him." She was speechless at that, and so she did not try to say anything, but turned and swept out of the room without another word. She hardly knew where her feet took her, and by the time someone came to her and took her hand, she realized she was dripping wet from wandering the gardens in the rain. If it had been Oberyn, she might have kept wandering still, but the touch was softer, the hand that slipped into her own smaller than his. She blinked, and saw that Sansa stood before her. "You should come inside," she said. Her face was shadowed by the hood of her cloak, but the concern in her eyes was easy to read, and helped, somewhat, to bring some warmth back into Ellaria's heart. Has he told her? Gods, she did not know whether that would be better, for she did not want to be the one to break it to her, but she did not want Oberyn to do so, either. The thought brought Ellaria to her senses again, and she tried to smile at Sansa. She could not fall to pieces, not yet, a part of her whispered in spite of herself, but she did not dwell on that. "Of course. You are kind to look out for a foolish old woman, my dear." Sansa smiled at that, a little, and tugged at her hand gently. "Come," she said. "I think the baths are mostly empty, that will help you warm up." Soft as her voice was, Ellaria could hear every word. So she let the maid lead her back inside. She was right about the baths. As it happened, not only were they mostly empty, but she had already arranged for dry clothes for Elaria. Besides, there was wine, too, and even a few pastries. The sight struck a sweet, soft chord in her heart, but she felt too weary to speak, and Sangza did not seem to mind the silence. After some minutes, though, after they had both settled into the large stone bath, after some of the chill that had leached into the depths of Elaria's soul had dissipated, if only a little, she knew she managed to gather her thoughts enough to speak. You have a right to know, you will know, of course, but my love has done something very brave and very, very foolish, and I am terrified, she thought, but somehow, she could not speak the words. There was no need, however. I know, my lady, Sangza said. I heard some of the servants talking. And yet you thought of me, Elaria said, looking up from the water to gaze at her. I should be ashamed of myself, going to pieces like that. You ought not to have had to hear it that way. It should have come from someone you, well, trust. She hoped, had even, now and again, dreamed it might be love someday, but better not to presume, not to make the sweet thing feel trapped or herded. But once again, Sangza surprised her, in that sweet, gentle way of hers. Someone I love, she said, in a voice that could hardly even be termed a whisper. Even so, it seemed, somehow, to echo through the room, or perhaps it was only in Elaria's heart. Neither of them spoke, and Elaria could hardly breathe for a moment. At last, though, she leaned a little closer, and took Sangza's hand. How long they stayed like that, she could not say, in truth, no more than a minute or so, probably. At last, Elaria said, with scarcely a tremor in her voice, I thank you for thinking of me, my love. And I am sorry to have given you one more thing to worry about, in my foolishness. The flush on Sangza's cheeks may have been from the warmth of the water, but it deepened now, and she turned her face away. Please don't say that, she said. With all that you have done for me, is it so strange that I should? You have a good heart, was all Elaria said. I am glad the gods saw fit to bring you to us. She looked back then, and gave a tremulous smile. As am I. Elaria could not truthfully have said that she was easy yet, but her heart did not feel quite so heavy as it had. You are very dear to me, Sangza, she said, and found that something in her had loosened, just a little. To both of us. Whatever happens, you must never doubt that. Those lovely blue eyes of hers seemed to shimmer for a moment, but perhaps that was just the steam of the baths. It was hard to be sure, in the dim light. And you to me, Elaria, she said. Both of you. Both of you. It gave her pain, to be sure, and fear, to hear the words, to try not to think, but she did not feel so distant as she had, so gripped by terror, or the anger it hid behind. Come, she said, as she heard voices approaching. She liked company in the baths, ordinarily, but just now she did not think she could bear any but Sangza's. That wine will not drink itself, and if we have much more in this heat, we shall faint dead away. We must not give our wretched prince the satisfaction of thinking we were swooning over him. His head is fat enough already, as I am sure you have noticed. Sangza smiled, rising along with her, and if it did not quite seem to reach her eyes, still, Elaria thought that perhaps she, too, seemed to move a little more lightly. The first time Elaria asked if she would feel better in new chambers, the day after they had discovered the body next to her bed, Sangza had demurred, but her answer had been a little too quick, and Elaria had asked her again, a little later. Sangza had seemed uncomfortable, but said, at last, I know it's foolish, my lady, but it is nothing of the sort, my love, Elaria had told her. That is why we did not stay in the Red Keep, you know, Oberyn could not sleep soundly there. The Martells, of all people, know what it is to be haunted by terrible things. Elaria was glad she had not taken the initial refusal, now, for her own sake as well as Sangza's. They took their supper in her new chambers this evening, and that, too, was a quiet affair. Neither of them had the strength to pretend she was not troubled. Still, though, the silence did not feel so weighty as it might have, there were no clouds of unsaid things hanging over their heads. There was a peace to it, if not a happy one. Oberyn did them the courtesy, too, of giving them their space, for which she was grateful. Her prince's bravado was something she loved, but just now she did not think she could bear it, not without weeping, or else slapping him in truth, or perhaps both. The two of them sat by the fire for some time after. The couch here was larger than the chaise in Oberyn's solar, but still, when at last she woke to see the remains of the fire, Elaria found that Sansa was curled up in her arms. It took her a moment to realize that a light touch on her shoulder had woken her. She turned to see Oberyn standing there behind her. In the shadows of the room, she could not see his face clearly, but she did not have the energy to fight any longer, and anyway, she did not wish to wake Sansa. Once more, he gathered Sansa up in his arms and carried her to her bed, and this time, she stirred a little, murmured something that Elaria could not quite make out. Oberyn did not sit this time, though, and neither did Elaria, though she lingered, just for a moment, to stroke Sansa's hair and press a soft kiss to her temple. Oberyn took her hand as they returned to his chambers, and kissed it, gently. She was glad of the touch, but could summon up no hotter feelings. Even the anger she had felt earlier had burned down to embers. Mercifully, he seemed to sense that she did not have the energy for more, and left her to undress as she would. When she turned to the bed, he was already there, looking at her, only looking. She climbed in beside him, and was glad, after everything, when he wrapped his arms around her, for all that it sent a pang through her, struck that fearful chord once more of what if this is the last time. Elaria did not have room in her for terror anymore. Neither of them spoke for some time. At last, though, she managed to break the silence. "I cannot go with you." He sighed, softly, but did not speak immediately. After pressing a gentle kiss to the back of her neck, he said, "I am not so stupid as to let Sansa back into reach of their arms, but I had hoped you, at least." Even now, Elaria had to smile at that, just a little. "It is for her sake that I cannot," she said. Oberyn did not answer, only waited for her to go on. After a moment or two of silence, she rolled over, looked close into his face for perhaps the first time since he had told her what he planned. "What did I expect?" she thought, looking at the sweet face of the man she loved. To see the stranger hovering behind him. Or the warrior shining down in a promise of victory. It was only the same face she had loved for all these years, the dark eyes, those eyes she knew so well from her daughters' faces. Gazing at her with a patience few could have guessed Oberyn Martell capable of. "After that poor fool's body turned up in her rooms, I gave the lady my word that I would not return to the Red Keep," she told him. "Do not ask me to break it. Not for this. I love you with all my heart, but I cannot watch you do this." "Not to watch me die, you mean?" he asked, and though his tone was light, his words were spoken quietly, and he no longer wore a smile. "Do you think so little of me, my love? I think you are rash, and brave, and angry over promises that have been broken, trusts that have been betrayed, injustices that have been done, the fresh ones and the old ones. And I know that even if you were twice the mountain's size I should fear for you, because you are so precious to me. You are the father of my children, and near as much as I fear losing them, I fear that something will stop you from raising our daughters at my side. I will not ask you not to do this thing, for it seems the wheels are in motion, but I beg you, do not do me such an injustice as to say that my fearing for you means I hold you in low regard." She did not speak but softly, for she did not trust her voice to stay steady if she raised it. Nonetheless, it cracked at the end, and she had to turn away from him once more, and hide her eyes while she tried to steady herself. He did not stir, nor speak, for some moments. At last, his arms went around her once again, a little tighter than before. "Forgive me, Elaria," he sighed. "Of course you are afraid. And of course, I would never ask that you break any oath merely to watch me showing off, much less one to Sansa." Elaria nodded. Another moment, and she said, softly, "She does love us, you know. She said so today, in the baths. Both of us." She did not wait for his answer, but rolled over again. His arms went around her again, but he seemed to understand that she could not say more, that she had no more strength in her to find words this night. Elaria slept but fitfully, not a surprise, perhaps. When Oberyn woke in the morning and began to dress, she gave up on finding any true rest, and rose as well. She had barely finished dressing when there was a soft knock at the door to the solar. "Come in," she called from the breakfast table, glad of the distraction from staring at the food and wondering how on earth she would manage to eat anything. She was not surprised, nor displeased, when Sansa entered. "Sansa," she said, rising once more. The lady let Elaria embrace her, even returned the hug. Indeed, it seemed to Elaria that, for a moment at least, she held near as tight to Elaria as Elaria did to her. They had only just sat and begun, half-heartedly, to pick at their breakfast before Sir Demon was knocking, too, and calling out for Oberyn. "My ladies," he said, bowing to them both, before turning to Oberyn, who was sitting at his writing table, sifting through the cask in which he kept his potions. "My prince, Sir Aaron has arrived. He's waiting in the stables for the moment, but if you want me to call him in." Oberyn waved the suggestion away, picking up a vial at last. "No, no, tell him I shall be with him shortly. In the meantime, see that my spear is well oiled," he said, tossing the vial to Demon, who caught it and was gone, whistling some cheerful tune as he went. "My ladies," Oberyn said, when they were alone once more, and turned to them. "You ought to eat. I cannot concentrate on fighting if I fear that you two are wasting away." The jest fell flat. What had the sweet idiot been expecting? His foolishness, now, that was near enough to make her laugh, except that under the circumstances, it only threatened to bring all her fear crashing back, but Elaria managed to move her mouth into something like a smile, and ate a bit of melon. Sansa did not move at all, only sat, her back straighter than any spear, her hands wrapped tight around the cup from which she did not drink. She was pale and drawn as she had not looked since she had left the keep with them the night of the wedding feast. Yet it was Sansa who spoke next, and Elaria marveled at her strength in doing so, however soft her words. "My prince," she began, setting her cup down, what will we do after?" Elaria heard her true question clear as day. Of course, what, she meant, will become of me if you fall? And it set some small part of her at ease, at least a little, when Oberyn seemed to hear it too. He knelt before Sansa, taking her hands in his and looking up at her. His face had softened somehow in those moments, too, just a little, and that, strange to say, reassured her somewhat. Perhaps he is not lost to all sense. "We shall make for Sunspear 3 days hence," was all he said. "I have Tywin Lannister's word that, should you be widowed, he will respect that you are under Martell protection. I would be the greatest of hypocrites to say we should all trust in Lord Tywin's word, however, so Sir Demon will remain here, and Sir Aaron Corgyle will squire for me. Should things go ill today, Sir Aaron will return immediately, and with Sir Demon will see you both back to Sunspear. We have picked a handful of the best men among our company, as well, and until you are both safely established in the old palace, under my brother's protection, at least one of those men will be with each of you at all times. I tell you this only to put your mind at ease, my lady," he said, running a thumb over her knuckles. "I have no doubt that soon enough, I shall be presenting you to my brother myself." Sansa's eyes were distant, and Elaria was not certain she had heard him, but then, suddenly, she pulled one of her hands free, and pulled something from her pocket, a handkerchief, white, with a silver direwolf embroidered in the corner. She said nothing, only pressed it into his hand. He stared at it, speechless himself, for several moments, and then raised the hand he still held and pressed it to his lips gently. Sansa managed a tremulous smile, a frail little thing, and Elaria had to turn away lest her strained composure give way entirely. She was still so angry and frightened that she could scarcely look at him when he embraced her. "But you will never forgive yourself if you do not," she knew. "Please, my love," she whispered, but could not remember what she meant to beg of him. "Be careful, do not do this thing, come back to me, to us, to your daughters, to this sweet maid we have found, all of that, and none of it." His eyes were soft, and he took her hands in his as he had Sansa's just a moment ago. "I swear to you, my love, I swear to both of you, I shall come back to you on my own 2 legs before the day is old. I swear it by the old gods and the new." She could not say anything to that. But when she finally kissed him, softly, at the corner of his mouth, she lingered long enough to whisper, "Lady Stark has known too much of betrayal for you to break your oath." And then there was nothing to do but wait. Chapter 10. Notes. Does it help if I say that what I intended as the last chapter was shaping up to be as long as several previous chapters put together, and finally, I decided I needed to prioritize readability over consistency with the 2 posts per chapter pattern. Not to worry. The last for real chapter, from Oberyn's POV, is about 3/4 done, so I can at least promise that it won't be as long before that, a few weeks, at most. Chapter text. Sansa. There was a little courtyard at the center of the estate where she and Elaria and some of the other ladies liked to sit and enjoy the cool of autumn. Much of the garden was still damp after the days of rain, but sitting inside was unbearable, and the two of them, not very long after Oberyn had departed, ended up outside. Of course, once outside, it seemed like a silly thing to have done. They had not been speaking much to begin with, but now they said even less, and Sansa suspected Elaria was quiet for the same reason she was herself, that she was straining her ears, trying to hear something from the Red Keep. At last, when they had made a few halting attempts at pleasantries, only for the quiet sounds of the gardens to overwhelm them once more, Sansa asked, almost desperately, "Would you tell me of your daughters?" Elaria started, almost, as though she had forgotten that Sansa was there, but her hand gripped Sansa's a little more tightly, and her eyes focused on her after a moment. My love, you do know how to catch a mother's attention, don't you?" she asked, and drew Sansa's hand to her cheek, kissed the back of it, so that Sansa found herself blushing, a little, in the midst of everything. I have heard you both speak of them a little, yourself and the prince," she said, hurriedly, trying to skip past the man who so haunted them both. "No, not haunts, what a terrible word, you stupid girl. Why would you tempt fate thus? The man who plagues you both." Elaria did not seem to notice her hesitation, though. She had Sansa's hand clasped in her own, though she had dropped them both from her mouth. She only held Sansa's hand in hers, and hers was laying in her lap once more, and her gaze was on the both of them, and there was a softness in her eyes. "You wretched creature," she told herself. "You gull. How can you look at her and think of such things?" "Your daughters, my lady?" she asked again, and hoped she did not sound too desperate. "You mentioned, which of them was it, you said, who liked to hear tales of the Night's Watch?" "My lord," Elaria said, with just a shadow of a smile. "Lorza, yes. My youngest. Our youngest, well, thus far, anyway." Here, there was some spark in her eyes, just for a moment, something like the sweet, merry lady that Sansa had grown to rely upon. Not a full sunbeam, perhaps, but a spark of light, at least. "Thus far, anyway," another something inside of her repeated, but she did not stop to think on that. "How old is she?" "Loe." "Barely 6," Elaria said. "I wanted to bring her with me. Oberyn convinced me it would be best to let her stay with her sisters, reminded me that they do not think of bastards half so kindly here as we do in Dorne, but really, she is a child of 6, how much could anyone object to her?" "Indeed," Sansa said, and thought once more of the letter she had written to Jon, hoping against hope that he might feel half so desperate as she did, half so eager to hear that someone still remembered Winterfell, that someone she had played and laughed and wrestled with recalled it all. "I do know some stories of the Watch. I should be happy to tell them to you, too, so you may pass them on." Another little movement like a smile. "God's willing, we will be gone from this city soon, and you will be able to tell her yourself when we reach Sunspear. I fear she won't give you a moment's peace. The little ones love their stories." "I'd like that," Sansa said. "Someone ought to pass on old Nan's tales." The thought made her sad all over again, for old Nan was dead now, lost with Winterfell. But just think how she would laugh at the idea of them going all the way to Dorne, she told herself, and it helped, a little. "You know, my lady," Elaria said, pouring more wine into their glasses, though neither of them had taken more than a few sips. "Gods, perhaps it is only cruelty to tell you this, but it cannot be, can it? To speak of the future." "I don't know," Sansa said, a little shakily. She caught Elaria's eye, and then, suddenly, both of them were laughing, ragged and harsh, only a hair's breadth from weeping. "I wish," she ventured, and hesitated, and then, while the smile was still on Elaria's lips, she forged ahead. "I wish that you would not call me that. Not if you do not want me to call you my lady, either." Elaria blinked, as if she had not understood her, and then she gave a shaky smile. "Ah, yes. Forgive me, it is terribly hypocritical of me, you are quite right." No, she added, her smile a little less fragile now, "of course you did not mean it that way, I know, I'm sorry. 'Tis only that I should call you that, and you hardly need use the courtesy for some bastard paramour." "You are my host," Sansa said. You are the lady of the household. And you are very dear to me," she added, lamely. There was another long moment of silence, but it sat a little less heavy about their shoulders. "You to me, as well, my sweeterling," Elaria said at last, moving a little closer. Sansa would have laid her head on Elaria's shoulder, except that she was a little taller, and Elaria's head was on her shoulder first. It was so strange, to be the one comforting her, for once. It had been strange yesterday, too, but somehow she had not felt the strangeness of it quite so much. "It may be that we shall have to comfort each other now," she thought, and just as quickly, tried to banish the thought from her mind. She must not dwell on it, she must not think such things. "What was it you wished to say, Elaria?" Sansa finally ventured, for lack of anything else to talk of. "Of the future. For perhaps that would be good to think of, just now." "Oh," that Elaria said, and Sansa could feel, somehow, or hear, or, she was not certain which, but she knew, somehow, that Elaria was smiling again, that little sweet smile she had never seen her wear for anyone but Prince Oberyn, and herself, she realized, and the thought was like the song of a nightingale, a piping burst of light in the pressing gloom. "Only, well, I expect Oberyn will be quite put out with me for telling you before he could, and of course the matter will need to be put before his brother before anything can be certain, but my prince frankly deserves a bit of disappointment, after what he has put us through today. My dear, you realize, do you not, that your marriage can, rather easily, be put aside?" She hardly knew what to say to that. She felt as though she had been dreaming of it for ages, but hearing someone say it, it seemed too good to be true. "Say something, you stupid," she heard someone hiss in her mind, and this time instead of the Queen or Joffrey, the contemptuous voice only sounded like Arya, like some adorable infuriating little creature she loved even when she wanted to strangle it, a tiny bit. "I suppose," she managed, at last. "Yes." Remembering what Elaria had said, though, she asked, "But, why should the prince be disappointed, not to be able to tell me himself?" Elaria only looked at her, and her eyes did not seem quite so shadowed, so Sansa was not sorry to have to ask. At last, an idea occurred to Sansa. "Do you mean," but she did not dare say it, she could only think that she must be imagining things, that she was just a silly girl still dreaming of handsome princes. "I would not have thought him so handsome as Joff, even," she thought, but that only went to show how stupid a girl she was, really. At last, barely able to whisper it, she said, "Do you mean Prince Oberyn?" Her hesitation, her fear that it must be too good to be true, must have shown on her face. Elaria misunderstood it, her brow creased slightly, and she said, "Would the match not please you? I know he is older than you may have expected, but—" Sansa shook her head, even as she was saying it, and found that she was laughing a little, or perhaps she was weeping, or perhaps both. I thought perhaps I was, that I aimed too high, or I was just being stupid again." "How many times must I say it?" Elaria asked, but she was smiling as warmly as ever as she did, reaching over to tuck a lock of hair behind Sansa's ear. "You are nothing of the sort. And frankly, as I told my prince myself, he is only the younger son, and he protests that he is a good deal too old for you, so we are agreed that if either of you aims too high in thinking of the match, it is him." She could not help it, even in the midst of this terrible waiting, Sansa found herself laughing a little. "Never. But, would the match please you, my lady? Truly. You are so dear to me, if anything I did were to hurt you, I do not think I could bear it." "Oh, my love," Elaria sighed, pulling Sansa into an embrace. "Nothing would please me more, Sansa, do not doubt that for a moment." They stayed like that for some moments, and with the birds singing and Elaria's warm arms around her, Sansa nearly forgot, for a few heartbeats, to be afraid anymore. "Whatever happens, I am leaving King's Landing," she told herself again, breathing deep and letting the warm smell of Elaria's hair, like sunshine and spices she had only ever tasted in dreams, fill her lungs. "And then, whatever happens, we will have each other." Then there was a commotion, and she felt Elaria stiffen in her arms, and all her fear came rushing back. Elaria bolted to her feet, though she kept Sansa's hand tight in her own, and Sansa, rising with her, saw that she had gone pale once more. Turning, she saw, oh, gods be good, it was Sir Aaron, racing toward them, his face pale, and Sansa could hardly breathe. "My ladies," he said, a little breathlessly, as he reached them. He was smiling, she noticed, dimly, but even then, it seemed too good to be true. Elaria must have thought the same, for she caught Sansa's hand, and together they bolted through the gardens to make for the door. But before they could even leave the gardens, Oberyn, supported by Sir Daemon, came limping in. The prince's face was pale, paler than she had ever seen him looking, and his eyes were shadowed, but he was smiling, smiling so widely you might have thought his face would split with it. At his other side, unfettered, near as pale as Ellaria and smiling near as widely as Daemon, walked her lord husband. He stood straighter and taller than she had ever seen him, she thought. Ellaria was weeping, she realized, and Sansa might be, too, now that she thought of it. It was like that day when he had brought the news about the judges and her innocence, only this time it was she who was sweeping Ellaria up into an embrace. It was Ellaria who was weeping on her shoulder. She flung an arm around Oberyn briefly, and the soft noise he made, the low hum, made her feel as if, in this moment, winter should suddenly swoop down upon them in all its ferocity, and freeze them like this, forever. That might not be such a dreadful thing. But then Oberyn was releasing her, or she releasing him, so that he could comfort Ellaria, and Sansa turned to face her husband. "My lady," Lord Tyrion said. His face was pale, and there were dark circles under his eyes, but he was smiling, too, as she had never seen him smile. "My lord," Sansa said, and though she felt the same steel inside of her, her lady's armor, it did not all seem quite so heavy as it had, quite so binding, so necessary. Perhaps that was stupid, he was still a Lannister, after all, but then, they all hated him near as much as they did her, now, didn't they? The thought made her giggle, for some reason, and then Ellaria was seizing her up again, twirling her around happily. "Oh, my love," Ellaria murmured, so low that only the two of them could hear. "Oh, now there will be plenty of time for us to talk of, well, but that can wait," she said, and hugged Sansa tight once more, before catching up Sir Daemon and whirling him about as well. "Gods be good," Martell Tyrion said to Oberyn, mildly. "Have you given my wife some potion, or is it only that Dornish food agrees with her?" "I did not know Starks were capable of laughter." Her relief made him almost handsome, and no one was more shocked than he when she stooped down to place a kiss on his forehead. The stunned expression on his face made her giggle, and then he was laughing as well. When he took her hand and kissed it, she did not mind, even squeezed it back. "I am leaving King's Landing." It was a strange thought. Sansa dared not think it too often, indeed, as if by doing so she might prevent it coming to pass after all. It was like some dream, and she was afraid of waking up. The rest of the day, and the next, and the one after that, passed much the same, like a strange, sweet dream. She hardly felt as if her feet touched the ground. The night before they left King's Landing was warm enough that they dined outside again, and though no formal feast had been prepared, so many of the other Dornish lords and ladies joined them, crowding the gardens and laughing, as drunk on relief and victory and vengeance as on any wine, that it nearly felt like one. It was not half so frightening as a true feast might have been. More than anything, it was like that sweet summer night after the tourney the king, the old king, King Robert, had given for father. Only better, maybe, for though she still sat beside a prince, and maybe he was not so handsome as she had once imagined Joff to be, this prince was more than just a story, he was a kind and brave and good man. It is not really so fine a night as that was, she thought. The music is not so sweet and the food is not so rich and the clothes are not so elegant, but somehow it's even better. Perhaps that had been the dream, then, for she had not known enough to see the truth underneath it all, and only now was she even a little bit awake. "You can't eat anything in a dream, fine or not," she said to herself, giggling, as she picked up one of the honeyed pastries she had come to love. "My lady." Lord Tyrion was on her other side tonight. Even he had seemed less angry, less sad, these last few days. She had almost forgotten to be afraid of him anymore. "Forgive me, she stopped herself in the middle of telling him he should not mind her. "Where is the harm in my telling him what I was thinking? The Lannisters hated him. He had near as little influence with them as she did, now. The worst he could do was say she was being stupid, and he had never done that even in the Red Keep, where he had so much power. He was not likely to say it now, knowing that she was held in high esteem by the Martells, who may have been the only friends left to him. He might think it, but he thought she was stupid anyway. Everyone did, except for Ellaria and Oberyn, and sometimes she still believed that they were only being kind when they said otherwise. "That is," she said, slowly, not accustomed to saying anything at all to him besides occasional courtesies. "It only reminded me, a little, of that night when we had first come to King's Landing, my father and sister and I mean, the king, King Robert, that is, he had a tourney for my lord father, and one night there was a feast down by the river, and I thought it was the most wonderful, magical thing I had ever seen. I suppose it's only because we're outside, it's really not like that at all, I know, but I was only thinking that even though it seemed finer, in some ways, that truly, it was more like a dream, and this seems, even though this is different, I like it better." Her face was red by the end, she could feel it, and her husband was only looking at her with those queer mismatched eyes of his, a strange expression on his face. "It's stupid, my lord," she said in a rush, "I know. It's just a fancy." "On the contrary," Lord Tyrion said slowly, still wearing that strange expression. It was sad, a little, but in a different way from the sad, hungry looks he had given her before. "You are wiser than any of us ever credited, I think. Your sister said something very similar to me not long ago," Prince Oberyn said lightly from her other side. She jumped a little, for she had not realized he had been listening, and felt her blush deepen. She did not deliberately hide her face, but she did look down at her pastry with new interest. Beside her, the prince went on, "I am glad to see that some of you Lannisters are beginning to have an idea of the lady's true worth. No doubt it rather sweetens the victory of having got her out of reach of our claws," Tyrion said, just a little sharply. "Lady Sansa, will you dance with me?" Sir Daemon asked loudly, jumping up from his place beside Ellaria. Yes, sir," she stammered, taking his hand and letting him pull her out into the open space past the fountain, where several people were already dancing merrily. "Ellaria thought you seemed uncomfortable," Sir Daemon murmured, guiding her into the line of the dance. She felt her face go pink again, but no one seemed to take any notice. It was a rather fast-moving dance, and she was hardly the only one flushed. "She is very kind," Sansa managed, when she found herself back with Sir Daemon a few minutes later. It was an insipid thing to say, but he did not appear to think so, for he only smiled. When they had moved back into view of the prince's table, Sir Daemon looked over and frowned. Following his gaze, she saw that Sir Aaron was leaning over and whispering something to the prince. Oberyn was no longer smiling, and Sansa noticed, suddenly, that the music was fading, and the voices around them as well. Sir Daemon took hold of her arm and guided her, smoothly, back toward the table, but the prince met them first. Gathering her courage, Sansa ventured, "Is something wrong, my prince?" Looking down at her, Oberyn's smile returned, only a little smaller than before. Fear tugged at her, only a little, but unmistakable, as if her skirts had caught on a nail, and she knew as if by instinct that if she tried to move they would tear. Prince Oberyn did not answer her, however, or if he did, she did not hear him. The crowd was parting, and in the new quiet, under the rain of whispers, there was a sound of armored boots on the path, like thunder. "The Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Sir Jaime Lannister," a servant announced, "and Lady Brienne of Tarth." "Kingsguard?" Sansa felt her stomach drop to her slippers at that, but Prince Oberyn, at least, did not seem too troubled. As if he had read her mind, the prince murmured, too soft for any but herself to hear, "You are surrounded by my guards and knights, not to mention those of my bannermen, my lady. I promise you, one night will not be sufficient to do you any harm." "I never thought he would," Sansa murmured back, and found that it was true. Oberyn's hand on her arm tightened a little, and when she glanced, just for a moment, at him, he was looking at her with something soft and sweet in his eyes. It made her feel stronger, braver, or at least, less weak, less afraid. She hardly knew Sir Jaime when she saw him. True, she had only seen him a few times before, and those 2 years ago, but even given that she had looked at everything through the veil of her silly little dreams then, she knew he was changed. She would not have guessed that he and the Queen were twins if she saw him for the first time today, for he looked 10 years the elder. He still moved with confidence, you still could not look away from him. But something was different, something more than the weight he had lost or the weariness in his eyes. "It is the white cloak," she realized suddenly. He had rarely worn it before, and then always over golden armor, Lannister armor, but here he was all in the white of the Kingsguard. "It suits him." It was Tyrion who broke the heavy silence that had fallen over the gardens as Sir Jaime came to a stop. "Brother," he cried, cheerfully, with an expansive gesture of the hand holding his wine cup. She was grateful to him then, to the way he made the silence feel a little less ominous, as if it really were something so simple as two brothers, reunited after a long time apart. But perhaps it was, for looking over at him, Sansa was startled to see that her lord husband was beaming, seemed near as happy as he had been after the trial. It made him look younger. "Have you come to see me off?" "Our sweet sister hasn't." "I can't imagine why." Something tightened in Sir Jamie's jaw, she thought, or flickered in his eyes, or something, but it was gone just as quickly, replaced by something like the careless smile he used to wear all the time. That did not seem to suit him so well anymore. "So I have. But that must wait, brother, for my purpose here is also Kingsguard business, with your lady wife." "Is it?" Prince Oberyn asked smoothly, squeezing her arm just a little, as if he'd felt the cold that seemed to spread through her with those words. "Fortunate for you that you have come when you did. We depart the city 2 days hence. Besides which," Tyrion added at her other side, "I won't have a wife much longer. I can't seem to keep them, can I? Perhaps if I try for a third, I'll see if I can make it last a year." He had said something about a wife on their wedding night, but she had thought it was just some story or joke that she didn't know. Sansa had no time to puzzle over that, though, for that strange something behind Sir Jamie's smile flashed again. It was almost like sorrow, or even fear. But all he said was, "Then I suppose I have been fortunate." "I was about due for a bit of good luck," he said, with a glance at his sword hand, where, she realized, there was no hand at all. "Gods be good," Tyrion said. "What happened?" "Oh, just one of father's pets," Sir Jamie said, with that twist of his mouth, the smile that wasn't he, again. "I must say, between this," he waved the stump of his hand, "and your trial, they don't seem to be worth whatever he was paying for them, do they?" "I don't know," Tyrion said. "I was entirely satisfied with Sir Gregor's work in my trial." Everyone laughed at that, and Sansa felt something in her ease a little. "If anyone doesn't belong here, it's the Lannisters," she told herself. "Not you." After everything, she could almost believe it. "A fair point," Sir Jamie said, chuckling. "And on balance, I'd choose you over Sir Gregor any day." "High praise indeed," Prince Oberyn said at last, and this time even Sansa laughed a little. "And here they say my brother has little use for me." "At any rate," Sir Jamie said, when the laughter had quieted a little, "to be sure, brother, I would like to say our own goodbye someplace a little quieter, but as I said, first, I have business with your lady wife. Or should I call you sister, my lady?" It took Sansa a moment to realize he was teasing her. Fortunately, she did not have to answer, for Tyrion did it instead. "Gods forbid. She's lucky enough not to have been born a Lannister. Besides, if she were our sister, I could hardly have married her." There was more laughter, but something about it was different, a little sharper, and Sansa recalled how angry Joff had been about the rumors. Sir Jamie barely blinked, but he did blink, and suddenly, Sansa recalled father's face, that last day, how he had seemed thunderstruck when she said he's not like that drunken old king. It was true. Gods be good, it was true, and father knew, and that's why they killed him. He was no traitor at all. Besides, Tyrion was saying, and she found that somehow, she was still standing, "It wouldn't do for you to get into the habit, we need only a septon to make the end of this farce official." "My prince," he asked Oberyn, "do you happen to have one handy? My brother wasn't able to be present for my wedding, but he could at least be here for its end. Let us see, at least, what the Lord Commander's business is first." The prince's voice was light, but his hold on her arm remained solid, not tight, really, not enough to hurt, but firm. "Of course," Sir Jamie said, and he seemed a little less tense, suddenly. "Come on," then he called behind him, and stepped aside, letting 4 of the prince's guards past him. They were bearing a chest, and when they set it down before the table, there was a rattling and clinking from within. "You, too," Sir Jamie said, and another knight, tall and plain-faced, joined him. The second knight carried a bundle, something long and narrow, wrapped up in white cloth. He had been hanging behind Sir Jamie for some moments, and he kept his eyes on his feet, even as he went to his knees, and Sansa could not help gasping, a little, when the knight, at last, chanced to look up at her, bright blue eyes looking frightened and sad beneath pale lashes, and Sansa realized that he was a woman. Lady Brienne of Tarth?" she asked, recalling the announcement. The woman's pale face flamed crimson. Yes, my lady, she mumbled. She looked up once more, opened her mouth, and then closed it again, looked away. Sir Jamie waited a moment more, as if he thought the lady might say whatever it was she'd meant to, but then he continued, smoothly, as if there had been no pause at all. You've greeted me somewhat more warmly than I expected, Prince Oberyn, he said. I can't expect my word is worth much, but for whatever it is worth, I am not here on any Lannister business. This is about an oath I swore to Lady Stark. Frantically trying to recall anything he might have said to her before he attacked father, but even that thought seemed still too treasonous. Before he had left the city, that was all, and finding nothing in her memory, Sansa said, aware of the quiet around them, I fear you are mistaken, sir. We have not spoken since the King's Road, I think, or even my father's hall. I was only a little girl, you could not have been expected to. Before she could stammer too stupidly for too long, Sir Jamie answered, not interrupting. Exactly, he was almost gentle. Peace, my lady. I suppose that did sound like a trick question. Let me start, then, by saying that you are not the first Lady Stark the wench here has heard me address. Sansa would not have guessed it was possible, but the Lady Tartha's face went even redder. Or, at least, her ears did. She did not look up from where she knelt, but she turned her head, a little, towards Sir Jamie. My name, she hissed, is Brian. Sir Jamie finished for her, but there was something in his eyes as he looked at the lady, something almost affectionate. If he were any other man, if he were not a Lannister, she might have called it something loving. Thank the gods. I thought perhaps you'd lost your tongue somewhere on the way over here from the keep. I'm pleased you haven't, for some urchin would doubtless have snatched it up and had it in a bowl o' brown by now. Laughter rang throughout the gardens again, but Brian seemed to shrink a little further into herself. The poor creature, Sansa realized. She's so used to being laughed at, she doesn't realize people can laugh at anything else. Please, Sansa said, a little desperately, my lady, please rise. Please do, Prince Oberyn said, and Sansa realized that he had not been laughing with the rest of them, and loved him a little more than she already did for it. I have heard tales of the Maid of Tarth. If half of them are true, any man would be proud to have her for a daughter. The lady flushed again, but she chanced to look up once more, and even seemed to smile, a little, tentatively, as she got slowly to her feet. You are very kind, my prince, she said, a little above a whisper. She glanced at Sir Jamie, who nodded, and she swallowed, cleared her throat, looked a little above Sansa's head, trying to look as if she were looking at Sansa without actually having to look at her. Sansa knew the trick all too well, after all her time in the Red Keep, and even if she had come at the Kingslayer's side, she found her heart swelling with pity for the poor woman. Would it be easier to speak someplace more private, she whispered, in a voice that would not carry beyond herself, Lady Tarth, and Prince Oberyn. The woman met her eyes for true then, and her lips curved, just for a moment, into something that might have been a smile. That's all right, my lady, she said, ducking her head again. You're very kind, she mumbled again, and then she took a deep breath and looked up at last. Something had steeled her, it seemed, for her voice hardly shook at all as she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, Lady Stark, that is, your lady mother, Lady Catelyn Stark, she took me into her service at Bitterbridge, after the death of King Renly, and something about the way she emphasized the title made Sansa's heart ache, just a little. Why, she's only a little older than I am, she realized suddenly. The woman was so tall, and her armor made her look even larger, that it was easy to miss. Lady Stark, Lady Catelyn, I mean, she was the only one who knew, the only one who did not. Her words, which had all spilled out in a rush, came to a halt, and her lips moved for a few moments, and then, at last, she said, she was a good and gracious lady, and ducked her head once more. She was a traitor, even now, she could not quite help it. My mother was a traitor, as was my brother. The old protest, which she had carried like a talisman, only changing his form was in the last few months. Prince Oberyn's hand on her arm tightened again, and she was only barely aware of him drawing a little closer to her, of his warmth at her side growing just a little bit warmer. She was a truly great woman, he said, as smoothly as if it had been what Sansa meant to say the whole time. I never met her myself, alas, but I have heard many things about her, and if she was half so gracious and good as the daughter with whom I am acquainted, she must have been a treasure. And he added, with a mischievous little glance at her. If she was even a third as pretty as our Lady Stark, she must have been a great beauty indeed. Even as Sansa's vision glittered behind a veil of tears, she felt herself laughing along with the rest of the crowd, felt herself blushing as Tyrion cried here, here, and all the lords and ladies echoed him. She thought suddenly, fiercely, the wolf in her heart wide awake, she was the most beautiful lady in the whole world. She said nothing, could not say anything, but she did not need to, for the new lady spoke instead. She was, my prince. She was very lovely. But she once told me, it was near our parting, the very night, the last time I ever spoke with her, she said that even when Lady Sansa, that is, Lady Stark, even when she was a little girl, milady could see that she would be more beautiful still. It was the most she had said so far, and at the end of it, she chanced another look directly at Sansa, and even, this time, a shy, sad, so very sad, smile. Or perhaps Sansa only imagined it was sad, because her own eyes were so full of tears once more. She started, but could not find any words. Even if she had been able to think of something to say, she feared she would only have started bawling if she tried to speak. She wanted to hug her mother, to preen and thank her prettily, only mother was dead, she was dead, Sansa could never hug her again, and what could it possibly be safe for her to say? He was the Queen's brother. A gentle squeeze of her arm brought her out of her circling thoughts, and Prince Oberyn murmured, "My lady." "It's all right," she whispered, and if that was not entirely true, at least it wasn't completely a lie, either. As she spoke again, louder, her voice barely shook at all. "I thank you for sharing my mother's words with me, my lady. Even now, they are a comfort for me. I lost my mother when I was very young, my lady," the woman said. Her pretty eyes were very sad, but her face was no longer quite so red. "Your lady mother was very good to me. I hope, it would make her glad to know that I was able to offer you some comfort." Sansa did not have to try to answer that, fortunately, for Sir Jaime cleared his throat. "We do bring more than words, my lady." He bent, opening the chest, and Sansa gasped. Even Prince Oberyn made a small sound, deep in his throat, which she thought might be surprise. It had taken 4 men to carry it in, and now she saw why, for it was filled with gold, mostly gold, though some jewels, as well, and she caught the scents of spices and perfumes. She looked over at Tyrion, for perhaps he might understand, but he was gaping along with the rest of the company. After a moment, or 3, she realized that no one had spoken, that it was on her to speak. Forgive me, Sir Jaime, but I do not understand." 10,000 dragons, Sir Jaime said. He did not smile, but he seemed to hold himself a little taller, something in his eye seemed a little brighter, though perhaps it was only the light. 1,000 each, or else the difference in gems and spices, from houses Greenfield, Clegane, Trant, Blount, Moore, and Oakurt, for the men of the Kingsguard who used you so ill. The rest from House Lannister, for if those men thought their behavior fitting for those who wear the white cloak, the failure must ultimately be with their Lord Commander. Mercifully, she did not have to answer this, for after a moment, he went on. "That is only part of my business with you, Lady Stark. The other part concerns not just mine own honor, but that of the lady." He nodded at Lady Brienne, who flinched, just a little. "Peace," he murmured, so low that only the 4 of them could hear him, Brienne, Prince Oberyn, and Sansa. And in truth, if she still believed in stories, she would have guessed from the look in his eyes that only Brienne was meant to hear him. "You see," he said, his voice clear and loud again, "your lady mother tasked Brienne here with a solemn duty, one that she could entrust to no other, not least, I expect, because no other could possibly have been so damned mulishly stubborn as to be relied upon to fulfill it. There was to be a trade. Myself, back here with my family, and you, back with yours." Forgive me, so she said, and hated herself for how she had only just said that same thing. The Hound had said once that she was like a trained bird, and he was not wrong. There was no talk of this at court, she said, instead. There wouldn't have been, the Kingslayer said. You were right, earlier, when you said that your mother was a traitor, but not, perhaps, in the sense that you have become accustomed to hearing of her. It was the other Northman, in the end, who saw her as a traitor. Lady Brienne still looked a little ill, but she interrupted, and her face seemed red, now, with feeling rather than fear. She was never a traitor, she said, hotly. Never. It was after we heard of, she trailed off, and looked down at the bundle she carried once more. It was after we learned of what Theon Greyjoy had done, my lady. To your brothers. Lady Stark, that is, the Lady Stark your mother, she made the trade without your brother's knowledge or consent, but it was no treason. Sansa did not have to answer this, at least, for Prince Oberyn spoke instead, even as he patted her hand with his, moved just a little closer to her, so that his warmth was all the more certain beside her. This is all well and good, he said, and to be sure, Sir Jaime, you do a greater credit to your cloak than any man who wears it has in some time with this. He nudged the chest with his foot. But I must ask, to what end do you bring the Lady Brienne here today? Riverrun, I understand, is now besieged by Lannisters, and Winterfell is held by the Boltons. I do not think Lady Stark's husband has any particular desire to see either of those places, and as she is under the protection of House Martell besides, I must confess that I am not fond of the idea of sending her to any of them. It was Brian who answered, and though her voice was a little thin, it was still clear. No, my prince, she said. I understand the lady is bound for Dorne. It is only, my lady, she said, and Sansa loved her a little for it, for the fact that she looked at her, spoke to her, as she said it, and not at Prince Oberyn, however dear he was to her. I served your lady mother. I swore to her that I would deliver her daughters back to her. I cannot fulfill that oath, but I can serve you. I can offer you my sword and shield. And strong arms they are, I have heard, that bear these things, Prince Oberyn said lightly. Though that armor would never do in Dorne, my lady. You would bake inside of it before you could get very far in any battle. I grant, Lady Stark, Sir Jaime said, it seems you've swords, and spears, aplenty about you already, but if you'd like one more, well, you'll have the sword, regardless, but if you'd like someone to wield it, you'll find no one more loyal, and few stronger, now that the mountain is dead, or more skilled, now that I'm short a sword hand. As to the sword, that's the other reason I've come with the lady. He spoke lightly, as ever, but there was something hard in his voice, and when he looked at Sansa, his eyes seemed rich and sad and even greener than the Queen's. I meant to send something back with you when I reached the city, Lady Stark, but aside from the obvious difficulty of where to send it now, I fear that it has been ill-used by my father. My lady, he said, but he was looking at the woman now, nodding, and she stepped a little closer, and held out the bundle she carried. I don't understand, she meant to say, except Brian knelt and unwrapped the bundle and she saw the pommel, the lion's head with its ruby eyes, and her heart seemed to freeze in her chest. She reached out, but stopped before her fingers brushed it, afraid that it might vanish, afraid that this was what it had all been building towards, some terrible trap that would spring now, in this moment. There were two swords, in fact, she saw, the second lay underneath it. Sansa knew little of swords, it was true, but she thought that perhaps, it was no ordinary steel, it was lighter and thinner than any other sword, and though there were red ripples in it, they were chased by smoky blue-black that she knew, that she remembered, between the two of them, perhaps, once, the two together had been. Valyrian steel, Prince Oberyn said, his voice soft. If I'm not mistaken, the blade that was gifted to King Joffrey at his wedding breakfast. And the other? Its brother. The same steel. Quite a gift, so the prince said. There, I'm afraid, you're wrong, Sir Jaime said, and though his voice was still light, he seemed to hold himself a little taller. 'Tis no gift at all. It was not my father's to give to Joff to begin with. Lord Eddard Stark's great sword, Ice, was seized along with all the rest of his property. I had intended to send it back along with the Lady Sansa and her sister, but my father does seem to know how to complicate things, doesn't he? I hope it is some comfort, at least, that he always wanted Valyrian steel, he added. This will vex him to no end. I fear the lady is far too good-hearted to care about such things, Lord Tyrion said, but I confess, it certainly pleases me to remember that. Everyone laughed, including, even, Sir Jaime. By the time it was quiet again, Sansa had found some sort of words. I thank you, sir, she said. She reached out, briefly, but could not quite bring herself to touch the steel yet. Instead, she folded the cloth back over the blades, covering them carefully, and took the bundle from Lady Brienne. It was so light. Valyrian steel was lighter than other steel, she remembered. The pommels were the heaviest parts. Sangza felt as if she held a child in her arms, something precious and full of promise. You have done a great service to me. To my house, she had first thought to say, but this was safer. As have you, my lady, she added, and gave the woman the best smile she could manage. If you would enter Prince Oberon's service. No, she said quickly, and then, as if she only now realized what she had said, her face went pale. Forgive me, my prince, she said, bowing her head to him. But, I swore myself to Lady Caitlin. I served House Stark. Lady Sangza is already beloved by House Martell, Prince Oberyn said, and though his tone was light, Sangza heard something deeper beneath it. I doubt that anyone here would be sorry to know she has in her service someone to whom oaths still have meaning. I certainly would not. By all means, Sangza, if she would serve you, I see no reason why she should not. Though as I say, once we reach Sunspear, the Master-at-Arms will have to see to some new armor. And if Lady Sangza will spare you, my lady, I think my daughter will be eager to test herself against you. We mostly use spears in Dawn, as you can see, he indicated one of the guards, and I am forever telling her that she must get more practice against an opponent with a sword. Lady Brian looked a little stunned at that, as if she had expected more of an argument. It seemed to take a moment for her to realize what else the prince had spoken of. Your daughter, my prince, she asked, and then reddened slightly. That is, I should be glad to, if my lady will have me, and she thinks it fitting. That was well done, Sangza realized, noting that something about the lady seemed to have softened a little. The poor thing is so used to being laughed at, and he has made her feel less strange. Of course, she said. She could not quite match Prince Oberyn's ease, of course, but she was able to manage something like it, as she said, a knight who does not keep his, or her, she corrected, skills sharp is not much use, is she? Then you will have me, my lady. Sangza tried to offer her a reassuring smile. She could not put people at ease the way Prince Oberyn could, but she thought that the lady seemed relieved. There was the briefest flash of something that might have been a smile of her own. Her eyes shone as she looked up at Sangza. Why, she is almost pretty now, Sangza thought, as she bowed her head once more. Yes, she said. If that is your wish, my lady. It is, she said quickly. She reached for her own blade, but something struck Sangza, and she said, wait. She held out the bundle instead. Brian looked at it for a moment, and then turned her gaze back up to Sangza. The look in her eyes was strange, they were so big, and her expression was, it was nearly sweet, nearly a child's. Sangza saw the longing in her eyes, but she shook her head. My lady, I am no Stark, I could not presume to. My brothers are dead, Sangza said. And my father too, and, they say, my sister. There is no one else to carry them, either of them. I hope that you will never have to use it, but I would not have them lie forgotten in some vault. Carefully, as though she expected the blades to vanish, or Sangza to snatch them back and laugh at her, Brian reached for one of them. She laid it, so carefully, at Sangza's feet, and bowed her head. If you will have me, my lady, then I am yours. I will shield your back, and keep your counsel, and if need be, I will give my life for yours. I swear it by the old gods and the new. And, remember, father. She had seen him take men's oaths before, but still, it took her a moment to find the words. Or perhaps they weren't lost, perhaps they were only difficult. She almost heard father speaking, felt as if he were watching her, the way he might sometimes, when she wanted to show off the new song she had learned, with that little half smile on his sad face. And I vow that you shall always have a place by my hearth, and meat at my table, and I pledge to ask no service of you that might bring you into dishonor. This I swear, by the old gods and the new. As Brian stood, Sangza took her hands in her own, and tugged, just a little, so that the lady leaned down, close to her. You mustn't weep, she whispered, pressing a kiss against her cheek. Or else I shall as well. Brian gave a soft sound, somewhere between a sob and a laugh, but she was smiling shyly as she blinked at Sangza. I will try, my lady. Chapter 11. Notes. Well, I had hoped to finish this in 2018, and here we are, just under the wire. Thank you all so much for sticking with me, and for all the wonderful comments when I first started. It had been the better part of 4 years since I'd written fic, or really much more than a couple dozen words of anything. I'd never written anything as long as this, and I was frankly pretty sure I couldn't finish something like it. It wasn't exactly quick, although, as I'd sometimes tell myself when I was feeling particularly frustrated with my slow progress, at least I was going faster than the source material, but it's been incredibly fun, and all the comments and kudos have made it even more rewarding, because it's so wonderful to hear that I'm not the only person enjoying it. By all means, feel free to find me elsewhere. I'm so hot right now on Dreamwidth, where I'm trying to get back in the habit of posting regularly, so would love to have more people to talk to. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Ellaria. On the last morning in King's Landing, Ellaria and Oberyn were breaking their fast when they received word that the Septon had arrived to finish the business of the marriage for good and all. The imp had been uncharacteristically silent all morning, and after the business was done, he begged a word with Oberyn. The change in him, whatever it was, seemed to have started with the Kingslayer's visit, after whatever words they had exchanged. Ellaria had heard from Zia that some of the servants had overheard shouting, that the Kingslayer had seemed shaken when he left, but none could say what the trouble might have been. He had not returned to the feast after, but whatever had pulled him away, it had not been sleep. His face was drawn and the shadows under his eyes were dark. Sansa said little, but her eyes betrayed her worry, even after the business was done, when Ellaria embraced her, and saw how she seemed a little lighter. Only once she and the Lady Tarth were aboard the ship, however, and ensconced in the second finest cabin to be found, did Oberyn say that he would seek her former husband out. He had asked the direction of an inn, it seemed, and sent off a few messages before leaving. I thought he only meant to have a few drinks, he said lightly, and the gods know he seemed to need it. I warned him against it, reminded him that we'd plenty to drink, but he hardly seemed to hear me. His thirst was great, it would seem. I shall collect him, never fear. He was troubled, Sansa said. My prince, should I? No, Oberyn said quickly, too quickly, Ellaria suspected, for Sansa to believe his lighter manner of only moments ago. No, he said again, a little more gently. The place is pleasant enough, but not fit for a lady of your station. I shall fetch him back, never fear. I shall join you, Ellaria said, and though her prince frowned, she said, before he could argue, Sansa may be right, it may take a woman to talk some sense into him, and as I am no true lady, you needn't worry about the place's suitability. My lady, she said, with a nod to Brian. I've no doubt you will see to Lady Stark's safety until we return. Of course, the girl said, her face even more grave than Sansa's. She touched the hilt of her new sword, and nodded. One of the serving girls at the inn told them which room was Lord's, and Daemon remained in the common room to ensure they were not interrupted. But once they had climbed the stairs, Ellaria found herself saying, "Let me speak with him alone first." Oberyn frowned, but he had hardly opened his mouth to argue before she gave him a gentle push back toward the stairs. "If any man tries to interrupt us, I have perfect faith that you will stop him, and if there is already someone else there, why, then I shall come back down directly. Besides, you know your bastard paramour is near beneath Lannister notice." He grumbled, but obeyed at last. She did not trouble to hide her amusement at the sulky look on his face as he headed back down for the common room, but her smile faded once he was gone, and she turned to knock. "My lord," she called. "'Tis Ellaria Sand. May I speak with you?" There was silence for a few moments, and she was on the point of giving up and returning when the door cracked open, and one of Tyrion Lannister's eyes peered out at her. "Lady Sand," he asked, and she did not miss the slight mushiness to his speech. "So I said, and so you can see," she said. "My prince tells me the beer is excellent, and it sounds as if you would agree. May I come in?" "May you?" he asked, opening the door a little wider. "Certainly. The beer is, indeed, excellent, and nothing would please me more than to share it with a woman as handsome as yourself. Should you, however. If the mountain could not withstand Prince Oberyn, I do not stand a chance, and he seems a rather jealous fellow." She only sighed, and raised an eyebrow. After a moment, he shrugged, and turned away. He left the door standing open, however, which she took as permission to enter. "You startled us all with your sudden departure, my lord," she said, as he hopped back up onto the bed and reached for the flagon to refill his cup. "We sail at sunset, and hoped that you planned to travel to Sunspear with us. Lady Stark was worried for you." "Was she, truly?" he asked, looking up from his drink. She has a kind heart, Elaria said, and your mood suddenly turned dark before you vanished like a thief in the night. You can hardly be surprised at her concern. He did not answer right away, for he was drinking deep. At last, he said, Circe always thought the girl was a bit of a fool. A sweet fool, to be sure, but... He did not finish, taking another drink instead. Elaria bore the man no real ill will, but nor had she any patience for his self-pity. If she is such a fool, then you are fortunate to be rid of her, and if it is foolishness to be concerned for you, then far be it from me to inflict mine own foolishness upon you any longer. Pray excuse me, my lord, she said sharply, and turned to leave. Forgive me, my lady, he said quickly, but her hand was on the door, and she did not let it go until she heard him set his cup down. You are right. She is a good-hearted creature. I expect there are few men who deserve such a sweet-natured lady, and I know that I am not one of them. Few men do, she agreed, letting go the latch and turning back once more. It is for her sake, as much as any, that I came. She has been dealt insults aplenty in her short life, many of them from your own house, without you adding more today. Once again, you are right, he said, picking up his cup again. My words were unworthy. I am glad to see, now that she is no longer under my protection, that she has such staunch allies. Elaria hardly thought she heard any sarcasm at all in his words, which, in his present state, might be the best she could ask. As I said, she was concerned for you, particularly given the state you were in on your abrupt departure. My prince and I hoped to persuade you to come to Sunspear, or at least to learn what your plans are, that we might set Sansa's mind at ease. He did not speak for some moments, though he only drank a little in that time. At last, he said, simply, there is a matter I must discuss with my father. Concerning my wife. Elaria frowned. I thought the undoing of the marriage was all settled. Is that jealousy I hear, Lady Sand? She snorted. If it were, would it matter? 'Tis not as if I can marry her, after all. But the Septon will not be on the same ship as Lady Stark, which could make things rather more difficult, so if there is still something to be done, I should like to see to it promptly. My lord father would be lucky to have a general as efficient as you, my lady. But no, that is all done and dusted. It is another wife I speak of, as it happens. The whole story is rather pathetic, but it turns out it was less pathetic than I thought, or perhaps more, actually. And this business cannot be sorted out in Dawn, she asked. You will be a good deal safer there, after all. Do you know, Sansa said the same thing, he said, with a hollow-eyed smile. She seemed under the impression that I would most certainly travel with you. At this rate, I may just think that I am welcome in the Martell's Hall. If you were not, you would have known already, I can promise you, Elaria said. Lady Sansa is worried for you. For myself, my prince might have died for you, and if that is worth anything, I would ask, if you are so determined to die, that you at least wait a month or so before you drink yourself into an early grave. Ah, yes, it would be a bit rude of me, I suppose, to pay Prince Oberyn back thus, though it's not as if he gets nothing else in the bargain. Tell me, has my father sent along Clegane's head yet? She only sighed. Men are all ridiculous. If it is a no, then. I protected her, didn't I? He did not seem to have heard her. Elaria frowned, uncertain what to say. She says that you were good to her, she said at last. She told us that you put a stop to your nephew's beatings. She was grateful to you for that. As though he had guessed her thoughts, Lannister snorted. What a compliment, that I stopped my wretched nephew from having grown men beat a girl. Still, given how closely we were related, perhaps not as great a monster as Joffrey is an achievement nonetheless. In truth, Elaria did not feel much one way or the other about Tyrion Lannister. But she knew the tone of a man in need of reassurance, and she thought it would put Sansa's mind at ease to know that they had tried, at least, to stop the man from doing whatever foolishness it was to which he had committed himself. Lady Sansa seems to care about you, she said, with as much kindness as she could manage, and that was rather a lot. She says that you always spoke her gently, and she thinks that you were good to her. I thought I was as well, as it happens. He stared into his beer for several moments, and even when he looked up again, his eyes did not seem to see Elaria. That's not the same thing, though, is it? Ellariah could give no answer to that. He did not seem to expect one, though, and as he reached for the flagon, he said, quietly, perhaps in another life, if she were not a Stark. Perhaps if you were not a Lannister, Ellariah said, a little tartly. He laughed at that, a little, without much mirth, but with more than she might have expected. You are truly determined, she began, but was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Come in, Tyrion called, and Ellariah was surprised to see that it was not Oberyn, as she had assumed, but a man whose face she could not make out beneath his hood. Oberyn was close behind him, though, and he wore a strange, closed expression on his face. When the fellow who entered pulled back his hood, Tyrion Lannister did not smile, but he seemed to focus in a way that Ellariah had not seen him do at all throughout their meeting. My lord, said Varys, bobbing his head. Lady Sand. Are you here to kill me, Varys? Tyrion asked. The spider's look of wounded innocence could have fooled a scepter. My lord, you cannot guess how glad I am to find you alive and well. You have so many enemies in this city. My lady, Oberyn murmured, taking her arm. There is no point in our staying any longer. You know where we are bound, imp, was all he said to Tyrion Lannister, and should you come to your senses, you will find yourself welcome in Sunspear. Give my regards to Lady Stark, was Lannister's only reply, before the door closed behind them. Did Lord Varys tell you aught of what he intends? Ellariah asked, her voice low, as they made their way back downstairs. Enough. Oberyn snorted, and took her hand in his. We have done what we could. I cannot say the world would be poorer for the loss of any Lannister, but there are plenty it would be better rid of before that one in particular. By the time they reached the Lady's Lantern once more, the anxiety of the captain, a Bravo C, was palpable. We lose the tide soon, good prince, he said. Will there be another traveler, or no? It would seem not, Oberyn said, as Ellariah spied Sansa at the stern, looking out over the city, with Lady Brienne at her side. By all means, man, catch the tide, he said, over his shoulder, as he followed Ellariah up to where she stood. Lord Tyrion did not come, Sansa said. She did not seem surprised. He says he has some business at the Red Keep still to finish, Ellariah said. Sansa nodded and turned away, though not quickly enough to hide the sadness on her face. Ellariah said nothing, only went to stand next to her, and when she put her arm around her waist, Sansa did not pull away. Ellariah lay her head on the lady's shoulder, and was glad when Oberyn struck up a conversation with the Lady Brienne instead of leaving the poor child to hover awkwardly behind them. There was too much wind for her to hear much of what they said, but he kept his tone light, something about her armor, and his eldest daughter. Sansa seemed to have noticed the same thing, and she said, softly, she is used to being laughed at, I think. I think you are right, Ellariah agreed. Like bastards, though, there is more room for women like her in Dorne, in my experience. Hopefully soon she will be a little more at her ease. Like me, Sansa said, almost too quiet to hear, but Ellariah thought she made out a smile in her voice, as well. Like you, Ellariah said, and tightened her arm about her waist, just for a moment. The sun was low in the west as the Lady's Lantern set off at last, and the air growing chilly, but Sansa stayed where she was. Ellariah stole a glance at her now and then as they made their way down the river, and she did not think she could have named all that she saw on the lady's face as she watched the Red Keep, where lights were beginning to glow in the windows. Perhaps that was only the growing darkness, though. She did not speak, but her hands were tight on the rail, and as the fortress grew less distinct with the shadows and their movement, she gave a long, shaky sigh, as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Oberyn. They were 2 days out from Sunspear, 3 at most, and he and Ellariah were lying in bed, the sweat long since dried on their skin after love-making, when she finally brought the matter up. You really are a ridiculous man, my love, Ellariah said. You have made that clear many times, he answered. Dare I ask why you say it today? Do you mean to dance around the matter forever? Sansa, Oberyn. She must marry, you know that as well as I. Better, I dare say, for a bastard need not trouble herself with such matters nearly so much as a prince, even one as dissolute as yourself. Certainly, she will have to marry eventually, he agreed, but I did not realize it must be now. We have no Septon on the ship, you know, perhaps we ought to put in at. His lady's voice remained light, but rather than a sigh or one of her gentle slaps to his arm, she only put her hand on his, and when he looked at her, did not tear her gaze from the horizon. "Oberyn, please." He felt ashamed of himself suddenly, only a little, but there it was nonetheless. Which, he supposed, had been her goal. "I know she will have to marry, Ellaria. She will be safer once she does. But she is only 3 and 10. If Elia came to us tomorrow and asked our leave to marry, would you give it to her? Our daughters are not burdened with their father's name. They do not stand as heirs to half a kingdom. You have said it yourself, she will be safer once she weds. And you know she will have no peace in Sunspear until it's done, besides, or the Water Gardens," she added, before he could make some joke, "or any place else you might think to hide her. And she is a woman flowered, Oberyn." "That," he began, and found that the words were hard to get out. Ellaria must have heard something in the way his voice caught, for she did not press him, only lay her head on his shoulder and let the wind and water and creaking of the ship speak until he could manage it. "That is what the Lannisters said of her. And it's what we all thought of Elia." He did not mean their daughter this time. Even with the noise of the sea, he heard, or perhaps only felt, the little sigh Ellaria gave. "You are not Tywin Lannister," she said at last. "Unless I miss my guess, Tywin Lannister will not be Tywin Lannister much longer, or did you think I did not notice, before the interview here, how you went out in search of certain ingredients? Or how you woke early, the day Sansa was to give her testimony, and went to the cellars in search of the perfect Dornish red?" "I ought to be ashamed," Oberyn thought vaguely, but it was barely half an idea, certainly it was not in Ellaria's voice. She was matter-of-fact about it, she understood at least as well as he did. So he only squeezed her hand, and she only raised his hand, atop hers, to her lips, only pressed a quick kiss to his knuckles. "And if you must know," she went on, "'tis not only out of fear that I ask you. There will be a veritable stampede of suitors, you must realize that. Even in peacetime, even if she were only the daughter of some middling merchant or penniless knight, she would hardly have a moment to herself. The bedding should wait, to be sure, but you must see that she's half in love with you, with us, already. And all the younger fellows are like to steal a march on your decrepit old prince," he said, and when she laughed, something inside him seemed to ease. "Precisely," she said. "Why, she's like to forget all about us." "Us," he repeated. It was stupid of him, he knew it even as he said it, but he knew that she would not love him less for saying it anyway. "Why do you not ask her, then? She is more comfortable with you." "Perhaps, in some ways," she allowed. "But she already knows that we are fond of her. She already knows that I love her. But however much that may mean in our tender ladies' hearts, if I were a man, I would still be a bastard, and if I were true-born, I would still be a woman." "That is not fair," he said, though she knew that quite well already. "No," she agreed. "Perhaps it is not. But it is how things are, and like any woman, she is well aware of how great a distance can lie between fair and true. I have hinted at the match myself, and I dare say the idea pleased her, and of course she understands that your brother will have his say, but it must be you who asks her, I think." "Well," he said, after another moment of quiet, "I suppose I ought to heed my lady, and be quick about it." No sooner had he stepped above the deck than he saw her. Her back was to him, as she leaned against the rail. The hood of her cloak had fallen back, and a few loose strands of hair, caught up by the wind, flashed like fire in the evening light. Lady Brienne stood close, the light glinting on her armor, as well. Brienne saw him first, and bowed. "My prince," she said, and Sansa, turning, dropped into a curtsy too. "My ladies," he answered, nodding. "Lady Brienne, may I beg a few moments with your lady?" She looked to Sansa, who nodded, offered her a reassuring smile, and bowed once more to Oberyn. "If you require any aid, my lady." "Of course," she said, with another smile. And so he was left alone with Lady Sansa, who was doing well at hiding her apprehension, glancing at him only once or twice from beneath her demurely lowered eyelids. "I hope the day finds you well, my prince," she murmured. "Better than some days, worse than others," he said. "Though, well, the day isn't over yet, so perhaps that will change." "For the better, I hope," she said. "As do I," he said, and turned, leaned against the rail and looked out at the land, as she had been doing when he approached. For himself, he would rather have faced her, taken her hands in his, but he must go gently, and it would be easier, perhaps, without trying to read those Valyrian steel eyes of hers. We will reach Sunspear in another 2 days, he said to start. Perhaps 3. Ellaria is growing quite impatient. He thought he heard a smile, just a small one, in her voice. Certainly he heard the wistfulness in it. I expect your daughters will be happy to see her again. To see both of you. They are lucky, to have such parents. We are lucky, to have such daughters, he said. But that is not what I meant, as it happens, though you are right that Ellaria can hardly wait to see our girls again. What she is particularly impatient with me about concerns you. Oberyn did not miss how she looked at him, just for a moment, though she had looked away again so quickly that he could not have named all that he saw in the glance. But he knew there was fear in it, and regretted his teasing. Forgive me, he said, I did not mean to frighten you. You did not, she said, so calmly that if he had not come to know her over these past weeks, he might have believed her. Not intentionally, to be sure, and I hope you know that I never would, and not overmuch, I hope, but you need not hide it from me. I am a very foolish man, as Ellaria or my brother could tell you, and it would not be the first time I have spoken without care. Perhaps it was only the wind that made her cheeks pink, but her voice was soft when she spoke. I do not think you are, my prince, she said. Foolish, I mean. You have a generous nature, my lady, he said, but she seemed a little more at ease now, and that helped. At any rate, in truth, I would not burden you with the question for some time, were it up to me. But it will arise, and likely sooner than later. You are wise enough to know this, so I shall not insult you by pretending. You will always be safe beneath any Martell roof, and likely you will be even safer in Sunspear than you were in King's Landing. But so long as the question is an open one. I must marry again, she said. Her voice was quiet and flat, and she did not look at him. I know I must, my prince. You need not fear, if that is what you came to tell me. No, he said, too quickly, and then sighed. Forgive me. That is a part of it, yes. I expect you wish I would only say whatever it is I mean to say, but, would it help if I said that I am not sure how to say it? It ought to be a merry subject for a maid of your years. Still, though, one of my daughters is of an age with you. I have heard that bastards grow up faster than true-born children, but even so, if a man came to me and asked for my Obela's hand, much less my Elia's, I would be hard-pressed not to gut him. You are very kind, she said, but she looked at him as she said it, and somehow, it did not sound like a mere courtesy. Truly, she added, and the little smile, and the sorrow in her eyes, near to broke his heart. You have been so good to me, my prince. I know my duty. And I know, too, that I am safe in your house, and I know that you will do all you can to see that the match is a good one. That much, at least, is true, he said. I know that there was some talk of Willers Tyrell. I know that is not possible now, she said. You need not fear, if that is what you wished to tell me. Oh, it's a trickier matter now that you are under Martell protection, but I should not say it was impossible, he said. Mace Tyrell is one thing, but Willers is another entirely. He has more of his grandmother in him than most guess, and I do not think I would be wrong to say we count one another friends, or as near as a Martell and a Tyrell can be to friends. If the match would please you, I think it can still happen. I dare say the Fat Flower would be delighted by it. We can make him think he has outwitted us. You are skilled at that, Sansa said. He was intrigued. At. She went a little pink again, but the look she stole from the corner of her eye was a clever one. At making people think they have outwitted you. Like earlier, when you said that you were foolish. You aren't, you only, perhaps afraid of giving insult, she broke off, and looked back out at the distant shape of land. I only act like it, he finished for her, grinning. As I said, you have a generous nature. I am sure my brother and Ellaria might take issue with you saying I am not a fool at all, but you are not wrong. I think you know a thing or two about that sort of mummery yourself, however. Do you know, both the imp and the queen said something similar to me, about your being cleverer than they gave you credit for. I was quite surprised, for I have never seen any indication that you are not clever. No, she said quickly, so quickly that something twisted a little in his heart, but then she stopped herself before he could protest, and seemed a little lost. Forgive me, her face reddened, and she ducked her head, hiding behind the hood of her cloak once more. No one would say I was clever. You are very kind, my prince, she said once more. He laughed this time, just a little. No one would say I was kind, he said. Perhaps we would make a good pair after all, eh? It had slipped out unbidden, but once he had said it, he felt, surer, perhaps. Easier, if only a little. It was the first time he had spoken anything like it to anyone but Elaria, and even then, she had spoken of it more often. Beside him, Sansa had gone still, but somehow, though perhaps it was only wishful thinking, he did not think it was fear, exactly, that had struck her. If she still dreams of marrying a prince, it is likely one much younger and prettier than you, a part of his mind whispered, but it was a little easier to ignore such thoughts now. Her hand was still beside his, close enough that he could feel the warmth of it, even through her glove. Oberyn took a breath. Gods be good, man, you are a Prince of Dawn, not some fumbling boy who can't hear a smith say breastplate without getting hard. But for the first time, he thought that maybe his nervousness could be a good sign. She has been through more than her share, he answered himself. If a horse has been ill-used, a man must go gently in trying to earn its trust. So it is with maids, too, and wolves, I expect. Carefully, as lightly as if he were catching a butterfly to show the little ones, so that she could shake him off if she wished, or at least pull away, he put his hand on hers. She did not move. Perhaps it was only wishful thinking, again, but he thought that, after a moment, her grip on the rail seemed a little less tight. Perhaps it was only the wind in the sails, but he almost thought he heard her sigh. After a moment, and then another, and then one more, he spoke again. As I say, as you say, yes, I expect you will marry again, and soon. I would not have you think, any man who asks, any match that I, or my brother, may suggest, I hope, I pray, that you will never feel compelled to say yes. I know that I speak for my brother in this as well as myself. As the eldest of my mother's children, he had to marry, but he was still able to let his heart guide him in the choice. That had not worked out so well for him or his bride's happiness, but he knew how fiercely his brother loved Arianne, Quentyn and Tristan, and so he did not think it could quite be called a failure, either. Neither of us will ever force you to the September at Sword Point, to be sure, but there are other ways of forcing a yes. You know that better than most, I dare say. I have the luxury of ignoring such practicalities as my brother may not, but he is no tyrant. You will have a choice in the matter, and you will never be offered a match that would injure or dishonor you. The Martells know all too well that a husband's cloak is not always the protection it ought to be. I know, she whispered. Perhaps he was only imagining the understanding in it, perhaps it was only that he heard the little sniff she gave, and realized that his own eyes seemed to sting unaccountably. I am glad of it, he said, and drew another deep breath. So when I say this, at last, I am sure you are thinking, for he has talked a veritable windstorm, it was a risky thing to say, perhaps, and he feared, a little, that she would protest again, but she only laughed, softly, briefly, but unmistakably, and it gave him the nerve he needed to finally speak the idea out loud. When I say what I mean to say, ask what I mean to ask, I hope that you will not feel you must say yes. Whatever your answer, you will never be unwelcome in my household, and the friendship between us, for I hope we are friends, will be as strong as if. Yes, she said suddenly, a little breathlessly. Her voice was almost, too loud. And for once in his life, Oberyn Martell had not the faintest idea what to do or say next. He only gaped at her for a moment, until she looked at him, her eyes near as wide as they had been that very first night in the Godswood, her face near as pale as it had been in the moonlight. Yes, he repeated, rather stupidly. Forgive me, she stammered, and all the color rushed back to her face and then some, so that it was now almost as red as the evening sun that was settling down behind the land. I should not have presumed, forgive me, I misunderstood. He could not help laughing, from relief and surprise, and only noticed that she had pulled her hand from under his when she clapped it to her mouth over her own startled giggle. No, he said quickly, forgive me, I am not laughing at you, I only, well, I can hardly blame you for losing patience with me, I dare say I should have said yes if only to stop the old man yammering. She only shook her head, her hands still clasped tight over her mouth. Her eyes were bright with much the same things, he thought, that were setting his heart to pounding like a bloody war drum. It was no presumption, he said, at any rate. You did not misunderstand. At least, I think you did not. I pray you did not, for I fear otherwise you have said yes to something else entirely, and I shall have to start all over again. My lady, Sangza. It was not the first time he had said her name, of course, but it felt strange this time, somehow new. You are under my family's protection, and I have daughters your age and older. I am not too hard to look upon, I flatter myself, but nor am I a maiden's dearest dream. If I thought that my offer, for you are right, of course, that is what this is. If I thought that you were only accepting out of fear, you need not say yes right now, he said, even as he heard her drawing breath to speak, and feared he had only pushed her to reassure him. You have spent so much time unable to speak freely, and even more than that, I have seen how gentle a heart you have. If you fear to tell me no, even if it is only your own sweet nature, your own kind heart worrying that you will hurt me, I hope, at least, that you would not fear to tell Elaria, and if not her, only wait until my brother has had time to arrange a few potential matches, and say yes to one of them instead. Whatever happens, you have a place in my heart, and in Elaria's. The two of us want only to see you happy and safe. If you believe nothing else, I hope you will believe that. She was weeping silently by the time he finished, and he felt, once more, as foolish as any boy, resented himself for talking so much, but would have resented himself more if he had pushed the burden of talking onto her instead. But she did not even seem to notice the tears on her cheeks. He realized, suddenly, that he had never actually seen her weep, not like this. A few tears, a tight voice, a flush of emotion, these he had seen, to be sure, but never something so unguarded as this, the tears that left her face wetter than the sea breeze could. Forgive me, he began to say again, but her smile stopped him. So instead, he only took one of her hands in both of his, and bowed his head, laid his brow upon the warmth of their grasp. There was still one more thing to say, and if he did not say it now, he did not know when he might be able to manage it again. Oberyn breathed in once more, and then out, and when he felt a little steadier, he lifted his head, though he could not seem to draw his gaze away from their clasped hands. There is no question of bedding yet, he said, and squeezed her hand just a little. I promise. 2 years, at least. 3, more if you wish, but no less than 2. You have had your blood, I know. If you tell me that you will consent, that you will deign to have me for your husband, well, I would call any other man in my shoes a fool if, as soon as we touched the dock, he did not find the nearest September and say his vows before the lady could come to her senses. But that is the wedding. The bedding, you are no fool, Sangza, and that is precisely the trouble, for you are 3 and 10, and at 3 and 10, you should be a fool. We are all fools at 3 and 10, and if we are not, then something has gone terribly wrong. You should have time to be a fool. If you were 10 years older, though, I should say the same. I have seen the change in you, these last weeks, with my own eyes. You are, at least, I flatter myself that you are, less fearful. You are going all poetical, my love, he heard Elaria say in his mind, with that warm affection that had made him hers years ago, and kept him hers ever since, and that made him think that perhaps this was not such a mistake after all. You would be a proud ornament in any household, but since the gods first brought us across each other's paths, I think some of your brightness is now your own good heart, not just the light on the armor you have had to wear. 7 hells, he was near to weeping as well, now. Neither of them spoke for a moment, and then another. The air was more than full enough, with the gentle waves and the wind and, now and then, the laughing shriek of a gull. At last, she drew a breath. He nearly began to speak again, but fought the instinct. You have spoken enough, he thought. Any more, and you may drown her. Yes, she said once more, and her voice was quiet, but it was as steady and warm as Oberyn had ever heard it. Let her speak, he reminded himself, as he raised his eyes from the hand he held in his and met her gaze. She was already near as tall as him. She is not so frail as anyone thinks. Yes, she repeated. Her smile was small, but he had seen her enough, he thought, to be sure that it was real. Yes, he repeated, just to be sure. The sweetest things he had ever heard had all been only a syllable or two, if they were words at all, the breath of one of his daughters as she slept, the sound of their names, the pealing bell of Elaria's laughter. The sound the mountain had made as he fell. You hate the Lannisters, Sansa had said, and when he said I do, that was when she had made up her mind, that was when she had entrusted herself to him. Yes, she said, and the word, or else the little stifled laugh she gave just after it, or else both, was a new sweet sound to remember. Yes, he repeated, and both of them were laughing suddenly. She was holding onto the rail with her free hand, as if the laughter were too much for her. At last, he lifted one of his hands, though he still held tight to her hand with the other, and smoothed her hair beneath her hood, and leaned forward. He meant only to kiss her cheek, but she surprised him, not for the first time, and he was beginning to think, to hope, not for the last, either. Before he could pull back, she tightened her grip on his hand, leaned forward, and pressed her lips against his. He was too stunned to do or say anything else, and when she pulled back herself, something in his face seemed to trouble her, for she flushed. "Forgive my forwardness," she said in a rush. "Forgive?" he repeated, and then whatever fog had wrapped about his brain seemed to clear, at least a little. She thinks she has offended me, he realized, and was glad to find that he still held her hand in his own. He could not help laughing a little, though it pained him to see how she seemed to wince. "No, no, Sangza," he said, and caught her cheek in his free hand, so that she turned to face him again. He did not know what to say, and after a moment, seeing how she trembled, he gave up on speaking at last, and only pulled her into an embrace. "Forgive me," he said. He could not have said how long they stood there. The sun was only a little lower, a little redder, when he opened his eyes once more, but something had shifted, he thought, something so significant that he could hardly believe it had not been hours, days, months. He could not have said how long they stood there. The sun was only a little lower, a little redder, when he opened his eyes once more, but something had shifted, he thought, something so significant that he could hardly believe it had not been hours, days, months. "Well," he said at last, "I, for one, am feeling a little faint with all of this." Sangza gave a little laugh, and so did he, but in truth, it was only half a joke. He felt a little dizzy, a little giddy, and he was glad when she let him take her hand. "Come, my lady, you must join us for supper, and we shall find the finest bottle of wine we can to celebrate." "That sounds very fine, my prince," she said, and though he could hear her little smile by now, he still found that he wanted to look at her face and see it, as well. "Only let me change into something more fitting, first." "Anything you could wear would be fitting, my lady," he said, "but as you will." They met Elaria on the steps below. There was scarce room for one person to go past another, and so she drew smoothly back into their cabin, but she did not miss. He would have been appalled if she had missed, the way he took Sangza's hand in his once she was down. The sound he made was too soft to be her clearing her throat, but it was something close. "I am almost afraid to ask," she said. "Yes," he said, before she had to. "Yes," she asked, and if it had been anyone else they were speaking with, he might have been jealous at how her attention was only for Sangza. Sangza did not speak at first, but he saw, from the corner of his eye, as he pretended not to look, the little nod she gave, and he heard her say, softly, "Yes." Elaria's laugh filled the close, dark little space, and she swept Sangza up in an embrace. "I told him," she said, half scolding, even as she pressed a kiss to Sangza's brow. "Several times, in fact. Thank the gods he finally saw fit to listen." "Oh, my lady, my sweet, oh, but it can all wait. I dare say you are weary, or hungry, or both. There is plenty of time." Sangza said nothing, but she smiled, and even as she flushed, she leaned forward and kissed Elaria's cheek. None of them spoke as she turned and nearly flew back to her own cabin, but she did look once more at them before she withdrew entirely, and her eyes sparkled. "My lady is so tactless," he complained, loudly enough to be heard behind the closed door of the next cabin, he was sure. "Look, you have frightened Lady Sangza off. Here I meant for us to celebrate tonight." "My prince is so good," Elaria said, just as loudly, smirking, "to remember me when I forget myself. Why, I cannot think how he came to have such a dreadful reputation." He heard the strangest little sound from behind Sangza's door. Perhaps she had only stubbed her toe, but perhaps, just perhaps, it was a little hiccup of laughter. He dared not draw attention to it, but in hopes he might provoke it himself, he said, "Yes, well, I have worked very hard to cultivate that reputation, so I hope you will be discreet." "Nonsense," Elaria declared. "Why, I think I shall send forth the ravens tomorrow." Unless you can think of a very good reason why I should not. He was sure that the last thing Sansa might hear, from her own cabin, before he closed the door of theirs, was their laughing. The end.